Romantic Tales. Chapter 93. Yi was speechless, but in old Madame Ye's eyes her guess was confirmed. Old Madame Yi sighed. Poor child, Grandma knows you have a hard life. But things are already like this and you have already married into the Prince Ding mansion. What else can you do? Even if you are Princess Ding, you still have to hold tightly on to the prince. The most important thing is to have children. As long as you have children, no one can touch your position. Do you understand? Does the prince have concubines? Yi shook her head. Old Madame Ye's smile became brighter. It seems that the prince still values you. It's better if you don't have concubines. As long as you have children with the prince first in the future. Looking at old Madame Ye's speechless expression, Yi pondered for a long time and finally understood old Madame Ye's meaning. Old Madame Yi was telling her that even if she didn't like Emo Xiaoyao's disabled legs, she must have children first. As long as she had children, if she really couldn't accept Emo Xiaoyao, she could push him to other women. Anyway, she was the princess and had status as long as she had children. A man's favor was mostly unreliable. Why didn't she doubt that Emo Xiaoyao couldn't do it? Yi had some evil thoughts. Thank you for your advice, Grandma Li'er knows. In order to prevent old Madame Yi from continuing to impart her experience to her, Yi quickly agreed. Old Madame Yi was very satisfied with her advice and nodded. Good child, Grandma knows that you understand better than Inger. Originally, you shouldn't have said this today, but after you become the Princess Ding, you won't have time to come home. Grandma will say it to you now. After a few days, if you have nothing to do, you can pick up your fifth sister and sixth sister to accompany you in the mansion. Yi was startled and slightly frowned. Old Madame Yi said, Shan and Lin are our good children. You sisters grew up together. If they can, it will be helpful for you and Inger. Grandmother's intention was for Lin to be more mature. It would be best if she could follow Inger to the Li Palace. Shan's temperament is lively, and your temperament can suppress her. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Yi couldn't help but want to go crazy. Isn't this old lady taking things for granted? Even the personnel had been allocated. It just so happened that the Li Prince mansion and the Prince Ding mansion had one each. No wonder Yi Ying's expression was so ugly just now. She was already sullen enough when she fought with Emo Jingli's concubine in the Li Palace. In the end, her maternal family even sent her own sisters to make things worse. Anyone would be depressed. Coughing lightly, Yi straightened her face and said with a smile, Grandmother, isn't it too early to talk about this? The prince and I haven't. If I rush to let my younger sister enter the residence, what will the prince think? Old Madame Yi smiled and said, Grandmother didn't ask you to do it now. Anyway, Shana was still young. It wouldn't hurt to wait another 1 or 2 years. As long as you have a plan in your heart, it's fine. Yi pulled the corner of her mouth and asked, although fifth sister and sixth sister are born of concubines, the status of our minister's mansion is not low. Entering the prince's mansion as a concubine would be a grievance to them. Old Madame Yi waved her hand carelessly and said, Marriage is decided by the parents. What grievance do they have? Isn't entering the prince's mansion as a concubine more honorable than marrying a minor official or a concubine's son as the legal wife? Li doesn't need to worry about the two of them. Shan and Lin have always been obedient. They won't have any objections. I have objections. Yi thought for a while and said, Li understands what grandmother and father mean. But our family's daughters, except for second sister who entered the palace, have all joined the prince's mansion. This is not good for second sister. This matter. Has grandmother discussed it with father? In fact, after thinking about it seriously, Yi understood why old Madame Yi was so worried. Wasn't it because of the unborn child in the palace who was still unknown whether it was a boy or a girl? Not to mention now that she had joined the Prince Ding mansion, even if she was still unmarried, Yi had never planned to cooperate with old Madame Ye's wild and imaginative plan. She really didn't understand why Minister Yi, who was considered an official for a long time, would agree with the plan of an old man who sat at home and didn't go out. Old Madame Yi was stunned. She squinted her old eyes and looked at Yi for a while before saying, What do you mean? Yi smiled and said, Li is also a daughter of the Yi family. Second sister is good, then naturally Li is good. But grandmother can't only care about two princes' mansion. You have to know. Prince always doesn't care about the facts. And the support of the officials in the court is also very important. This Yi smiled faintly and said, Li doesn't know about fourth sister. But if it's the Prince Ding mansion, grandmother should rest assured that Li doesn't need any help. Old Madam Yi was silent for a moment. She also knew that Yi Li's words made sense. Not to mention that Yi Li was confident that she could control the Prince Ding mansion. Then she really didn't need the Yi family to compensate another daughter. But if Yi Li wasn't willing and they forced one to go over, it wouldn't look good if the sisters fought against each other. And from old Madam Ye's point of view, whether it was Yi Shan or Yi Lin, they obviously couldn't win against Yi Li. After thinking through this, old Madam Yi didn't insist anymore. She smiled and said, Li Er's words make sense. It's grandmother who didn't think it through. Just treat it as if grandmother didn't mention it. Although the Prince Ding mansion had a prominent reputation, but in the past generations, Prince Ding had never participated in the royal family's affairs. From this point of view, the Prince Ding mansion's role wasn't as big as the princely mansion. Yes, grandmother didn't say anything. Li also didn't hear anything. Yi Li softly replied. Of course, it would be best to dispel old Madam Ye's thoughts. In the future, the Prince Ding mansion would be her home. She didn't want to see any existence that would make her feel uncomfortable there. After chatting with old Madam Yi for a while, the servants came to invite them to eat. Because it was a family banquet, there weren't any outsiders present. Only old Madam Yi brought Minister Yi and Wang Shi, Mo Jingli and Yi Ying, Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li, as well as Nanho's heir Fu Zhao. At the dining table, Yi Li could clearly feel a cold gaze sweeping over her body from time to time. Without even looking up, Yi Li could guess who that person was. Yi Ying attentively served Mo Jingli dishes. Mo Jingli was still staring at Yi Li from time to time with an expression as if someone owed him a few thousand taels. Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li ate leisurely and calmly, occasionally serving each other's favorite dishes. Fu Zhao looked thoughtfully at this side and then at the other side, drinking and eating as if nothing had happened. On the other hand, Minister Ye's expression was slightly awkward and comical. It could be seen that he was trying to make the atmosphere at the banquet more harmonious and natural. But he couldn't afford to offend any of the three sons-in-law. Other than Nanho Shitzi, who gave him some face, Mo Xiuyao wasn't hard to get along with. Mo Jingli's face clearly showed that he wasn't happy. Speaking of Prince, we haven't seen each other in a few years. Let me give you a toast. In the end, it was Fu Zhao who broke the strange atmosphere. He stood and gave a toast to Mo Xiuyao, also to Wang Fei. May Prince and Wang Fei have a long and happy life together. Mo Xiuyao raised his wine cup and said with a warm smile, Thank you for your auspicious words. I wasn't able to go and congratulate you on your wedding. Don't blame me. He raised his head and drank Fu Zhao's toast. The smile on Fu Zhao's face became more genuine. He said with a smile, No matter. We've known each other since childhood. Now we are relatives. Before we came, my mother told me to invite Wang Fei to visit the Marquis Fu when she has the time. This Nanho Shitzi clearly knew how to conduct himself. Everyone in Jing knew that while Nanho Shitzi hadn't inherited the title, the Shitzi Fei was in charge of the Marquis Fu. At this time he didn't mention the Shitzi Fei and only spoke of the Nanho Furen. Chapter 94. Yi Li raised her cup to return the toast and said with a smile, Shitzi has written Nanho Furen for me. Yi Li raised her cup to return the toast and said with a smile, Shitzi has written Nanho Furen for me. Mo Jingli looked at the people talking and laughing in front of him. He lightly snorted and stood saying, Since Fu Zhao has made a toast, then Mo Xiuyao, I will also make a toast to you. Mo Xiuyao raised an eyebrow and smiled faintly, saying, I also haven't drunk with Jingli in a long time. Will I also make a toast to you and Li Wang Fei? Mo Jingli lightly snorted and waved away the servant girl who came forward to pour wine. He personally poured a cup for Mo Xiuyao and himself. He raised his head and drank it all. Then he looked provocatively at the wine cup in front of Mo Xiuyao. Mo Xiuyao smiled and did not speak. He raised the cup and drank it all. Again. Mo Jingli raised the wine pot and filled it again. The two actually started to drink at the table. Yi Li frowned as she looked at the two men drinking without a word. Minister Ye's eyes were about to fly out, but no one paid attention. Old Madam Yi tried to persuade him but was ignored by Mo Jingli. Mo Xiuyao nodded at old Madam Yi with a smile but did not refuse Mo Jingli's urging to drink. Yi Li glanced at Ajin, who was standing not far away. Ajin detected Yi Li's gaze and showed an anxious expression as she looked at Emo Xiuyao, who was silently drinking. Emo Jingli once again reached out to pour wine, a jade-like hand covering the wine cup. Emo Jingli's face darkened. He raised an eyebrow at Emo Xiuyao and said, Emo Xiuyao, what is the meaning of this? Yi Li's expression was indifferent. She placed the wine cup in front of her. Is Li Wang drunk? The one who stopped the wine was me. Why are you asking about my family's prince? Emo Jingli sneered and said disdainfully, what business does a woman have when a man drinks? I won't lower myself to a woman's level. Yi Li smiled coldly. Women also won't lower themselves to Prince Li's level. It's just that this consort and prince still need to visit the Su family in the afternoon. Does Prince Li want our prince to visit the Su family while reeking of alcohol? One had to know that not everyone could be as carefree as King Li. Especially since the Su family is a scholarly family. They have a long history of etiquette. Does Prince Li want this consort and prince to be kicked out by uncle? Emo Xiuyao, it can't be that you've developed the problem of being afraid of women after getting married, right? Emo Jingli glared at Yi Li with a dark expression for a while before speaking to Emo Xiuyao with a cold smile. Emo Xiuyao looked at him calmly. There was even a trace of a smile on his face. Jingli, it's not a bad thing to respect your wife's opinion. Li is right. We still need to visit Sir Su and Imperial Censor Su in the afternoon. You know that Sir Hong Yu really dares to kick us out. Emo Jingli was not going to let this go. How could I not know that when returning home, not only does one have to see the maternal family, but one also has to see the maternal family? Stop wasting words. Emo Xiuyao, are you going to drink I's toast or not? I'm not drinking. Emo Xiuyao replied bluntly. Yi Li, who was sitting next to him, could clearly feel that Emo Xiuyao's mood was unusually good. Even when he was talking to Emo Jingli, Yi Li could not help but hear a hint of teasing in his voice. Prince Li, since Prince Ding still has things to do, let's not force him. It's not too late to drink when we have time. Fu Zhao helplessly tried to mediate the situation. They had all grown up in the capital and had known each other since they were young. Emo Xiuyao and Emo Jingli had not been on good terms since they were young. Who would have thought that after not seeing each other for so many years, they would become even worse? This made things difficult for them, the bystanders, to handle. Looking at Emo Xiuyao, Fu Zhao could not help but rejoice. Emo Xiuyao's temper was much better now, and he could even listen to Wang Fei's advice. If it was in the past, the two of them would have either fought to the death or come to blows. Jingli, Ying coaxed, don't we still have to go out in the afternoon? Let's treat Prince Ding to a drink next time. Emo Jingli narrowed his eyes at her. He snorted softly and did not speak anymore. Everyone else also sighed in relief. Minister Yi rubbed his aching temples and swore in his heart that he would never let these two sons-in-law drink at the same table again. After lunch, Yi Li and Emo Xiuyao held hands and bid farewell to the Su Fu. Before they left, Su Hongyu called Emo Xiuyao alone to the study to talk for an hour. Yi Li was not allowed to listen in and could only wait outside the study. The brothers of the Su family, other than Su Qingchen, whose whereabouts were unknown, and Su Qingze, who was ordered around by second aunt, were all in the yard with her. Su Qingyan leaned on the table and looked at Yi Li with a grin as he said, Li Jiejie, my father won't eat brother-in-law. You don't have to worry about him. Yi Li rolled her eyes at him in exasperation. Which eye of yours saw me worry about him? Su Qingyan pointed at his eyes and said with a smile, both of my eyes saw it. The usually careless Su Qingfeng felt a rare emotion. He looked at Yi Li and said sadly, I didn't think that in just a few days, Li would become someone else's. If Prince Ding bullies you, come back and tell Sanji. Sanji will definitely stand up for you. Yi Li nodded and said seriously, I will remember. Sanji, don't worry. Su Qingfeng sighed and said, in a few days I will be leaving the capital. Sanji will tell second brother that when second brother gets married, second sister-in-law will often go to the Prince Ding mansion to see you. Su Qingyan smiled and said, Sanji, you don't have to be so exaggerated. The Prince Ding mansion is not a mountain of swords or a sea of flames. With us here, how could Prince Ding dare to bully Li Jiejie? Su Qingbai, who was by the side, rolled his eyes and said, who was the one who retreated the moment they saw Prince Ding? How did the Su family produce such a timid lad that they even hoped that he would stand up for Lear? Su Qingyan's face turned red. Thinking of someone's methods, he couldn't help but tremble and said, Siji, you can't blame me for being timid. really someone too cruel. Thinking of the two unlucky bandits in the courtyard that night, Su Qingyan went back and had nightmares for a few nights. Now that he saw Emo Xiuyao, he reflexively wanted to hide behind Su Qingbai. Yili looked at Su Qingyan's guilty expression. Although he didn't finish his words, she could guess the gist of it. It was probably someone who did something frightening that scared Su Qingyan. Yili didn't intend to delve into this. Emo Xiuyao was a famous general who had killed his way out of the battlefield when he was young. She didn't expect him to be a spotless and elegant gentleman. After returning to the prince's mansion, Yili began to busy herself with taking over the various affairs of the prince's mansion. Just the various account books made Yili look at them for 2 days before she was able to figure them out. At the same time, she was secretly amazed that the Ding prince's mansion was indeed rich. Several generations of princes' accumulated family property made Yili amazed. When she was almost done, she received an invitation from the palace for a banquet. With the reason of sending envoys from various countries to bid farewell, whether it was Emo Xiuyao or Yili, they obviously couldn't find a reason to refuse. Entering the palace once again, Yili's mood wasn't very good because of the unpleasant experience from the last time. The Ding prince's mansion's horse carriage didn't alight at the palace gates like ordinary nobles. Instead, it directly entered the palace gates. Emo Xiuyao was wearing a moon-white robe with a silver dragon embroidered with auspicious clouds and eagles. His hair was tied up with a white jade crown inlaid with sapphires. He looked cultured and elegant. "Is Li in a bad mood?" Yili lazily leaned against the horse carriage and said, "It's nothing. The palace always makes people feel a little depressed." Chapter 95. Emo Xiuyao couldn't help but smile. "I don't know how many people think of ways to enter the palace. Li's way of thinking is very special." Yili faintly glanced at him and said, "Stepping on the bones of countless people to climb up or being stepped on by others to climb up, is it really that interesting?" Emo Xiuyao thought and then said with a smile, "The process is definitely boring, but the majority of people can't see the process. They only need to imagine that they have climbed to the top. The pleasure of standing above tens of thousands of people is enough for them to forget everything." Yili raised an eyebrow and stared at him for a while before asking, "Xiuyao also thinks this way?" Emo Xiuyao stilled. He looked down at his hand on the armrest of the wheelchair. A long time later he said in a deep voice, "It's not just that I don't want to be stepped on by others to climb up." The carriage was silent for a while before Yili's voice sounded, "I don't like stepping on other people, but I also don't like people stepping on me." "Prince, we've arrived. The Empress invites Wang Fei," a Jin said in a deep voice from outside the carriage. The carriage was gradually coming to a stop. Yili estimated inside that the carriage was not at any of the places she had been last time. Based on the general location, it should be near the Empress Feng de Palace. Emo Xiuyao tilted his head and said, "I'm going to see the Emperor and can't go in with you. Can you go by yourself?" Yili nodded and prepared to leave the carriage. Emo Xiuyao pulled her back and said in a low voice, "Be careful. If anything happens, immediately have Qing Wan come out and find a Jin. He's near Feng de Palace." Yili frowned and said, "But you?" A Jin was Emo Xiuyao's personal guard and the person he trusted the most. If a Jin wasn't by his side. Emo Xiuyao laughed and said, "You don't think that a Jin is the only person I can trust, right? Don't worry, go. Alright, see you later." Hearing him say this, Yili didn't insist and got off the carriage. There were already people from Feng de Palace waiting outside the carriage. Seeing Yili come down, they hurriedly came forward to greet. "This servant greets Princess Ding. This servant is here on the orders of the Empress to welcome Wang Fei." Yili nodded, "Thank you for your trouble. I don't dare. Princess, please follow this servant." When they entered Feng de Palace, there were already quite a few upper-class women present. Feng de Palace was decorated with a noble atmosphere, but it wasn't overly extravagant. The finer details had a special kind of elegance. Yili couldn't help but feel a little curious about this empress who wasn't famous among the common people. "Greetings to the Empress. Long live the Empress." Yili walked into the hall and respectfully bowed to the graceful woman in the hall. "Imperial concubine, please dispense with the formalities." Sit. The Empress's voice was elegant and peaceful, without any of the high and mighty aura of the Empress as imagined. "Many thanks, Empress." Yili got up and was led by a palace maid to an empty seat at the front. Although Yili was considered the youngest of the upper-class women present, Yili's status wasn't high. But in terms of status, the imperial household was above all the princes, marquises and dukes in the capital. The status of the imperial concubine was naturally above all the other women. Even though Yili came late, there was still a seat at the front left for her. Yili casually looked around and saw many familiar faces. The first madam of the Duke Huafu was with Hua Tianxiang. Beside Zhao Yang eldest princess and Zhao Ren eldest princess were Princess Xixia and Princess Ronghua, who she hadn't seen in a long time. There was also the beautiful Li Wangfei Yiying. At this time, sitting in Fengde Palace, it was clear that they all had some kind of relationship with the imperial household or had titles. Ordinary titled madams weren't among them. After sitting down, Yili looked at the empress sitting on the phoenix throne. The empress was wearing a bright yellow phoenix robe, graceful and noble, showing that she was the only queen of the country. When Yili looked over, she happened to see the empress looking at her with a smile. She couldn't help but be startled. The empress wasn't particularly beautiful. She was also from the Duke Huafu, but Hua Tianxiang's appearance was better than the empress's. But that kind of peaceful and graceful posture was something that Hua Tianxiang and all the other upper-class women present didn't have. "Empress, is this the imperial concubine?" A clear voice came from the opposite side, immediately attracting everyone's attention. Yili looked in the direction of the voice and saw a young girl in colorful clothes sitting on the right side of Zhao Yang eldest princess. Obviously her status was extraordinary. The empress smiled and said, "Yes, this is the imperial concubine. Speaking of which, Princess Lingyun has been ill since she came to the Chu capital. She hasn't seen the imperial concubine yet. Princess Ding, this is Princess Lingyun of the Xiling Kingdom." Yili nodded and said, "Princess Lingyun greets you." With Yili's status, even if Lingyun was a princess, she couldn't be disrespectful. But this princess who had been smiling prettily just now acted as if she didn't hear Yili's words. She impudently looked at Yili before saying, "I heard Brother Wang say that you pulled out the cloud-embracing sword?" Yili nodded slightly and said with a faint smile, "I have indeed seen the cloud-embracing sword." Princess Lingyun wasn't satisfied with this answer. She stood up and raised her chin saying, "This princess doesn't believe it. This princess wants to compete with you." "I don't know how to use a sword," Yili calmly said. "How is that possible? How did you pull out the cloud-embracing sword if you don't know how to use a sword?" Princess Lingyun stared at her and said aggressively. Yili raised her eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "Princess, pulling out a sword and using a sword are two different things. Who said that people who don't know how to use a sword can't pull out a sword?" She really didn't understand why these princesses and young misses were so insistent on forcing others to compete with this and that. They didn't care if the other party knew what they wanted to compete with. This princess doesn't care. This princess wants to compete with you. Could it be that you don't dare to accept the challenge? Yili stood up. "Princess, you are asking this in front of the empress and all the madams and young misses in the capital. How could I not dare?" Princess Lingyun said with satisfaction, "Since it's like this, where is your sword?" "In reality, I haven't touched any other sword besides the cloud-embracing sword. The sword that Genom of Gojoseon sent me that day was the first time I encountered such a weapon. So I don't have a sword and I don't know how to hold one." "Pfft, forcing someone who hasn't even touched a sword to compete with you?" "Empress, can Tianxiang compete with the general in embroidery tomorrow and claim that my embroidery skills are the best in the world?" Hua Tianxiang leaned against Madame Hua and asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but it spread throughout the entire palace. Many people couldn't help but cover their mouths and chuckle. The empress glared at Hua Tianxiang, but there was a faint smile in her eyes. "You have the nerve to talk about your little embroidery." Hua Tianxiang covered her face and laughed. "Aunt Empress, how can you say that? I just want to have a good reputation. The title of being the best in the world is so impressive." Yili looked at Hua Tianxiang gratefully. Hua Tianxiang winked at her and leaned against Madame Hua, covering her face shyly. The empress held back her laughter and said to Princess Lingyun, Princess Ding isn't good at swordsmanship, so let's not compete." Princess Lingyun's face was already red from Hua Tianxiang's words. She gritted her teeth and said, "She clearly pulled out the cloud-embracing sword. How can she not know swordsmanship? She's clearly toying with this princess." Chapter 96. The cloud-embracing sword belongs to the Ding Palace. Princess Ding can pull it out however she likes. What does it have to do with you whether her swordsmanship is better or not? Princess Ronghua glanced at Princess Lingyun and sneered, are all foreign princesses so strange? Do they all like to force others to compete with each other? You know that she can't do it but you still won't give up. Why don't you just ask Princess Ding to admit defeat and admit that your swordsmanship is better than hers? Hearing Infanta Ronghua's words, not only Princess Lingyun, but also Princess Xixia, who was beside her, felt a little embarrassed. Many people present couldn't help but remember that Princess Xixia asked Princess Ding to compete with her in dancing during the flower festival. The Empress saw that it was going to be awkward, so she quickly said, well, let's forget about it. Ronghua, don't talk nonsense in front of the two princesses. Princess Ronghua snorted and sat next to Princess Xiaoran and stopped talking. Compared with Yili, she hated Xiaoyang Princess and Princess Xixia, who were as aggressive and deep as her. She also hated the new and arrogant Princess Lingyun. Noble Consort Lu is here. With a sharp announcement, Noble Consort Lu, dressed in a yellow dress, stepped into the hall with a cold look. Greetings, Empress. Noble Consort Lu was still as indifferent and arrogant as last time. She just bowed slightly to the Empress. It seemed that this noble consort didn't intend to give face to the Empress Dowager or the Empress. The Empress seemed to be used to noble consort Lu's appearance. She nodded slightly and said, no need. Why did noble consort Lu come to Feng de Palace today? Many noblewomen present also showed a surprised expression. Noble consort Lu usually didn't attend the banquets in the palace. Even though many of them went to the palace almost once a month, they rarely saw noble consort Lu. Noble Consort Lu said coldly, I have nothing to do. The Emperor said that Empress's palace was lively, so I came to see. Empress, don't you doubt it? The Empress frowned slightly but still said generously, since you are interested, then sit down quickly. She waved her hand to let the palace maids prepare a seat for Noble Consort Lu. Noble Consort Lu walked to Yili and asked, can I sit here? Yili smiled and said, if you don't mind, please sit down. Seeing Noble Consort Lu sit down next to Yili, the Empress didn't bother to prepare anything else for her. The Empress had always kept a respectful distance from Noble Consort Lu, the Emperor's favorite concubine. Fortunately, although Noble Consort Lu was very arrogant and sometimes even capricious and unreasonable, she restrained herself a little in front of the Empress. Today's coldness and unreasonableness was the limit. At least compared to the Empress Dowager, the Empress felt that she was strangely balanced. Noble Consort Lu sat next to Yili with a cold and serious face. The women who wanted to talk to Yili, the new Princess Ding, gave up for the time being. They didn't know that Noble Consort Lu never gave face to others. If they got close to her and annoyed her, they would only be embarrassed. With no one to talk to, Yili had to sit in her seat and listen to others. Fortunately, she was also a person who could sit still. I heard what happened in the hall just now. Yili thought that Noble Consort Lu wouldn't talk to her. Hearing the faint voice next to her, she was slightly stunned. You are so useless. Last time, you didn't know how to dance with the Princess of Nanzhao. This time, you don't know how to sword with the Princess of West Hill either. What do you know? Noble Consort Lu's voice was full of dissatisfaction and disdain. Fortunately, her voice was very low. Otherwise, the rumor that Princess Ding was scolded by Noble Consort Lu at the first palace banquet would be spread all over the capital. Listening to Noble Consort Lu's scolding, Yili didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If she remembered correctly, this Noble Consort Lu only admired Mo Shuyao and not his mother. What's with this tone full of disdain? Nyang, I have no interest in dancing. Also, the Ding Palace doesn't need a princess who can dance. As for swordsmanship, it doesn't seem to be something that the noble ladies in the capital need to learn. Noble Consort Lu snorted and said, you forgot to mention that your painting skills are ordinary. You even need people to write poems for you. I need to be careful. If you dare to lose face, I won't forgive you. Nyang, are you really not Mo Shuyao's mother? What are Noble Consort Lu and Princess Ding talking about? Why are you talking so happily? Eldest Princess Xiaoran suddenly asked. Noble Consort Lu raised her head and stared at her for a while before saying, which eye of eldest Princess Xiaoran saw that I was happy? Eldest Princess Xiaoran choked and couldn't say anything. Yili sighed in her heart. She was endlessly envious of noble consort Lu's straightforward personality. It was a pity that not everyone had the right to be so straightforward. If it wasn't for the emperor's protection with noble consort Lu's personality, no matter how good her family background was, she wouldn't be able to live long in the palace. Seeing eldest Princess Jouren's speechless and angry expression, noble consort Lu seemed to be in a good mood. She stared at the person in front of her and proudly said, "Didn't eldest princess ask what I and Princess Ding were talking about? I said that since Princess Ding doesn't know swordsmanship, how about I compare notes with Princess Lingyun?" Noble consort. The empress frowned in disapproval. Noble consort Lu didn't care. She only coldly stared at Princess Lingyun and said, "Princess, what do you think?" Although Princess Lingyun hadn't been in the capital for long, it didn't stop her from knowing that noble consort Lu was the most favored noble consort of the Eastern Emperor Chu. No matter what, she definitely wouldn't make a move against noble consort Lu. Regardless of whether she won or lost, if she accidentally hurt noble consort Lu, the Eastern Emperor Chu would investigate and she would be the passive party. After all, they were still on Eastern Chu soil. Just now Lingyun was just joking with Princess Ding. Lingyun is young and doesn't know any better. How could she dare to make a move against noble consort? All right, noble consort. Princess Lingyun is just being childish. Moreover, she doesn't know that Princess Ding doesn't know swordsmanship. She isn't deliberately trying to humiliate our Chu state. The Empress lightly said. Her face had a rare resolute expression that couldn't be disobeyed. As a noble consort Lu standing up for Princess Ding was both good and bad. Moreover, the matter of noble consort Lu admiring Prince Ding before entering the palace wasn't a secret among the nobles. What she needed to do was find a suitable excuse for noble consort Lu to stand up for him. He chatted with the Empress for a while. Because it was still early for the banquet, the Empress invited the noblewomen to the imperial garden to enjoy themselves. Thus, everyone thanked the Empress and left for the imperial garden. Before leaving, noble consort Lu was asked to stay by the Empress. Once they left Feng de Palace, Hua Tianxiang immediately approached Yili and said with a smile, "Greetings to Princess Ding." Yili glanced at her and said, "Do you have too much time on your hands?" Hua Tianxiang waved her hand and said, "How can you say this? According to the rules, I should at least greet the imperial consort. So, noble consort Lu didn't make things difficult for you just now, did she?" Yili didn't understand. Why would she make things difficult for me? Hua Tianxiang silently looked at her with a compassionate expression. "Li, I've long told you to go out more often, but you didn't listen. Don't tell me you don't know noble consort Lu." Hua Tianxiang finally realized that it wasn't a good thing to gossip about a noble consort in the palace. She moved closer to Yili and whispered in her ear. Before noble consort Lu entered the palace, she was very admiring of Prince Ding. Yili was speechless. Even Hua Tianxiang knew this. It seemed that it wasn't just admiring. She nodded, "I know. She didn't make things difficult for me." Chapter 97. Hua Tianxiang walked beside Yili and shrugged. "To be honest, I was shocked that she would stand up for you. Judging from her expression, it doesn't seem like she has other intentions towards you." Noble consort Lu's swordsmanship is very good? Yili decided not to tell Hua Tianxiang that she was despised by noble consort Lu. Hua Tianxiang sighed, her face full of envy and jealousy. Speaking of which, every year in the capital, there has been a selection of the most talented woman or the most beautiful woman. But noble consort Lu was definitely a real beauty and talent. It is said that the 100-flower feast that year was the most exciting year since the founding of the Chu state. At that time, the two women who participated in the competition were Han Mingyue's top two beauties of the Chu capital. You can imagine the scene. Yili agreed. Even if she didn't see it, she could imagine the ferocity of the competition. In the end, noble consort Lu won? No, she lost. Hua Tianxiang said regretfully. At that time, noble consort Lu was only 13 years old, and Su Zuidi was already 16. Even if noble consort Lu is now a peerless beauty, she was only a beauty at 13 years old. So the top beauty of the Chu capital was Su Zuidi. The second beauty of noble consort Lu was painted by Han Mingyue when noble consort Lu was 15 years old. Of course, in terms of appearance, I have never seen a woman better than Su Zuidi in this world. Noble consort Lu lost without complaint. Yes. And then, And then the two of them faced each other. That year's 100-flower feast basically had nothing to do with other people. Su Zuidi took first place in dance, painting, poetry and zither. Noble consort Lu took first place in chess and calligraphy. Their opponent took second place. After Su Zuidi got engaged, she didn't participate in the 100-flower feast anymore. Noble consort Lu, on the other hand, took first place in dance, painting, poetry, zither and so on. As long as there was a 100-flower feast, she took first place. Yili was completely convinced. No wonder noble consort Lu looked down on her. She was indeed very capable. Seeing that Yili didn't care, Hua Tianxiang said angrily, "Can't you work harder? Don't you have any sense of crisis?" Yili sighed, "You think too much. She and noble consort Lu were not on the same path, okay? If she really had to learn to be a peerless genius, she would rather play a month-long wilderness survival game. She had no problem drawing topographical maps or gun blueprints, but when it came to drawing, she was only good at drawing embroidery. She had already outperformed herself during the 100-flower festival. Forget it." Waving her hand, Hua Tianxiang glanced at Princess Ling Yun, who was staring at the two of them, and asked, "How did you provoke Princess Ling Yun this time?" Yili helplessly replied, "I'm sure this is the first time I've seen Princess Ling Yun. I've only seen the Crown Prince of Zhenan in Xiling before." Hua Tianxiang was puzzled. Why didn't she look like she wanted to eat you? Cloud-grasping sword? This was the only thing she could think of that had anything to do with Princess Ling Yun. Cloud-grasping sword? That belongs to the Ding Palace. What does it have to do with Princess Ling Yun? Everyone knows that it was sent back from the Western Tomb. Princess Ling Yun probably couldn't bear to part with it. Let's go somewhere else. Yili suggested as she stared at Princess Ling Yun, who was walking towards them. Hua Tianxiang curled her lips. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it can't be avoided. Don't tell me you want to run around the Imperial Garden? Ding Palace's consort. While they were talking, Princess Ling Yun had already arrived in front of them. The noble ladies who were not too far away also inadvertently glanced over. "Princess, is there anything else?" Princess Ling Yun said, "This princess wants to talk to the princess alone." Yili frowned and said, "I don't know what I need to talk to the princess about." Princess Ling Yun's beautiful face slightly sunk as she said, "This princess has traveled 1,000 miles to come here. Could it be that Ding Wangfei isn't even willing to compensate this princess for a walk in the Imperial Garden?" Yili helplessly nodded and said, "Since it's like this, princess, please." Princess Ling Yun gave a soft snort and raised her head as she walked forward. Yili gave a comforting look to the worried Hua Tianxiang and followed with a sigh. Young people nowadays really need to be taught a lesson. Princess Ling Yun dismissed her maid, and Yili was naturally embarrassed to let Qing Wan and the others follow. The two walked side by side along the path of the Imperial Garden. Yili asked, "Princess, is there anything you want to say to me?" Princess Ling Yun turned her head to look at her and snorted, "You are not worthy of Prince Ding." Yili smiled, "Princess, you flatter me. Marrying a daughter to a high position, doesn't this mean that I have joined a good family and found a good husband?" Ling Yun said disdainfully, "You don't have to pretend like this. This princess has already investigated you. An unknown young lady of the minister's mansion, and a woman whose engagement was broken off by Li Wang. She was betrothed to Prince Ding by the emperor, so she has some reputation in the Chu capital. Even if you got the title of the most talented woman in the capital, so what? You are still not worthy of Prince Ding." "Oh, is that so?" Yili's expression did not change and she asked lightly, "Even if I am not worthy of Prince Ding, what does it have to do with you, princess?" Princess Ling Yun raised her eyebrows and said with a slightly proud smile, "You will soon know what this princess and this princess have to do with each other. Prince Ding is this princess's Yili. If you know what's good for you, then obediently scram." Yili frowned and stared seriously at Princess Ling Yun in front of her for a long time, before asking, "Princess, I have a question to ask." "Speak." "May I ask, does Xiao Yao know who you are?" Yili asked, "According to what I know, Xiao Yao has not left home for at least 7 years. Then the most conservative estimate is that even if you met each other, it would be when the princess was 7 or 8 years old. May I ask, do you think Xiao Yao remembers who you are? Or does he not know you at all?" "So what? I am the most honorable princess of Deling. Could it be that I cannot compare to you?" Princess Ling Yun glared at her angrily. Yili looked at her strangely. If the princess really wanted to marry Prince Ding, Shouldn't she have appeared before our wedding to fight with me? Now that we are already married, why did the princess only appear? You have to know that the Prince Ding mansion has never had a case of marrying two consorts at the same time, or divorcing a wife and remarrying again. Or would the princess rather be a concubine? If not, even if I die and the princess successfully marries into the Prince Ding mansion, she will only be a stepwife, and will still have to come to my coffin to kowtow and burn incense on the 1st and 15th of every month. You wish. This princess will definitely become Prince Ding's official consort. Princess Lingyun said angrily. You can think whatever you want. Yili looked at her pitifully. However, I feel that heir apparent Genom of Gojoseon's intentions seem to be different from yours, don't you think so? A trace of hatred flashed through Princess Lingyun's eyes. If Lei Tingfeng hadn't put her under house arrest in the embassy the moment they arrived in the Chu capital, and announced to the public that she was not in good health, and only released her after Prince Ding's wedding. Why did she only come to find Yili now? Yili smiled as she looked at Princess Lingyun, whose expression kept changing, and continued. Speaking of which, there aren't many who bring a young princess on a diplomatic mission to a neighboring country. Usually it's for political marriage? I heard that Xiling suffered a snowstorm last winter. Could it be? There were many things that she just didn't want to think about, but it wasn't that she couldn't understand. She wasn't worried about this Princess Lingyun at all. No matter how capable she was, the emperor would definitely not let Imo Shuyao marry a Xiling princess to make things difficult for him. Not to mention the Xiling princess, even the princess of the northern tribes and the princess of the southern Zhao had nothing to do with Imo Shuyao. Only the little princess in front of her couldn't see the situation clearly, and thought that she could get what she wanted if she directly came to her and asked her to back down. She really didn't want to look down on the intelligence of these princesses, but were there any normal princesses among the younger generation? Or were they really too young? Chapter 98. What exactly do you like about Prince Ding? Yili asked curiously as she looked at the determined Princess Lingyun in front of her. Princess Lingyun gave a soft snort and said, What do you know? Prince Ding is the most outstanding man in the world, the youngest and most powerful general as well as the most talented man in the world. This princess wants to marry the most outstanding man in the world. He doesn't seem to be as outstanding as you say. Yili reminded her. You're really unbearably unscrupulous. Talking to you makes this princess feel extremely disgusted. Prince Ding must be blind to fall in love with a woman like you. I know that it was the Eastern Chu Emperor who gave the order for him to marry you. How could a woman like you understand just how outstanding he is? Looking at the righteous woman in front of her, Yili reflected on whether or not she should be ashamed. Compared to this princess in front of her, Yang Chanru was so normal and Ying was so cute. I will definitely become Princess Ding. Princess Lingyun stared at her and said resolutely. Work hard, I wish you success. Yili lightly said. I will definitely become Princess Ding. Princess Lingyun said through gritted teeth. Then she jumped into the man-made lake by the side of the road. Save me, the princess has fallen into the water. A sharp female voice rang out in the royal garden. Yili cursed and also jumped into the water. Bastard, there really are a lot of crazy people these days. Imo Xiao, you better prepare to die. The moment she fell into the water, Yili couldn't help but want to curse. Even though she had persisted in training her skills and body these past few years, compared to her previous life where she had to go through wind and rain and roll in the mud, there was still a gap. Moreover, even if this body wasn't favored, it was still a pampered girl from a wealthy family. When she entered the water, she couldn't help but have a slight spasm. Fortunately, Yili was already mentally prepared. She quickly adjusted herself and headed towards Princess Lingyun. She successfully grabbed the struggling Princess Lingyun and dragged her towards the bottom of the water. With a single glance, she could tell that this Princess Lingyun didn't know how to swim. Yili couldn't help but sneer. Very good, should she praise this princess for having the courage to sacrifice herself for love? Daring to jump into the water without knowing how to swim. Then let her experience what it feels like to drown. She believes that in the future she will know what it means to do. Originally, Princess Lingyun didn't panic. She knew that someone would come to save her. But soon she realized that she was quickly sinking to the bottom of the water. She couldn't help but panic and struggle even more fiercely. Yili snorted in her heart. She clearly felt the movement in the water and knew that someone had entered the water. Yili quickly went behind Princess Lingyun and knocked her out. Then she dragged her to the other side. When she estimated that Princess Lingyun was about to reach her limit, she pushed her back. It seemed that in an instant everyone in the Imperial Garden had gathered by the lake. The Shilin Kingdom guards and the Imperial Garden guards who arrived first had already entered the water to save her. "She's there!" The people by the lake suddenly shouted. Everyone quickly looked over and saw a colorful brocade emerging from the water. Then they saw that Princess Ding had also emerged. One of her hands was supporting Princess Lingyun. In everyone's eyes, it was clearly Princess Ding who had saved Princess Lingyun. Yili looked at the guards who had discovered their figures and quickly swam over. She smiled at Princess Lingyun, who was still unconscious. "Princess, wake up. Princess, someone has come to save us." Originally, Yili didn't use too much strength to save Princess Lingyun, who was dragged out of the water, quickly opened her eyes. However, she realized that Yili was smiling mockingly at her. Ignoring their current situation, Princess Lingyun screamed, "Let go of I." Then she struggled with all her might. "Princess, don't move. I don't need you to care about me." Seeing that the guards were already in front of her, Princess Lingyun fearlessly pushed Yili away. "Very good." Yili looked terrified as she followed the direction that Princess Lingyun had pushed her away and sank back into the water. When Princess Lingyun came out of the water, the palace maids waiting on the shore immediately put on dry clothes for her. Qing Yu and Qing Xia angrily glared at Princess Lingyun and said, "Princess, our princess was kind enough to save you. Why did you push her?" Princess Lingyun raised her head. As expected, she saw that many people were looking at her with condemning eyes. She couldn't help but be surprised. This was different from what she had originally planned. "I didn't push her." Hua Tianxiang coldly smiled and said, "A princess dares to do something but doesn't dare to admit it. Even if you want to lie, you should make up a lie that can fool people. Or does the princess think that everyone here is blind?" Princess Lingyun angrily said. She pushed this princess down. "This princess doesn't need her to save me." The Sunshine eldest princess said with a heavy expression, "Princess means that Princess Ding pushed you into the water and then jumped in herself to save you? In the end you are safe and sound. She still hasn't come up? Princess better pray that Princess Ding is fine. Otherwise, even if you are the Xiling princess, my Dechu state won't let this go." "Princess, we found the princess," Qing Yu anxiously called out from the shore. In the lake, Qing Shuang and Qing Wan each supported the clearly unconscious Yili to the surface. The people on the shore quickly helped pull her up and put on dry clothes for Yili. Qing Yu held her hand and took her pulse. Xiaoyang princess anxiously looked at Yili and said, "How is it? Why hasn't the imperial physician come yet?" Qing Yu raised her head and said, "Many thanks for the princess' concern." The princess drank a few mouthfuls of water and fainted. There shouldn't be anything serious. However, the princess needs a place to rest. Xiaoyang princess looked around and said decisively, "This place is the closest to Morning Glow Hall. Send Princess Ding there." Everyone crowded around the unconscious Yili and led by Xiaoyang princess to Morning Glow Hall. Princess Lingyun, who had also fallen into the water but was safe and sound, was naturally unintentionally ignored by everyone. Looking at the crowd hurriedly leaving, Princess Lingyun's face alternated between green and white. "Princess." The palace maid of the Xiling kingdom following her carefully called out. "Get out." Princess Lingyun said angrily. The atmosphere in Morning Glow Hall was heavy. In the inner hall, Emo Shuyao sat by the bed with a grave expression and looked at the unconscious woman on the bed. The imperial physician carefully went forward to take her pulse. The eldest princess sat at the side and asked with a frown, "How is Princess Ding?" The imperial physician thought for a moment and glanced at Emo Shuyao before replying, "Your Highness, Princess, the princess consort is fine. She was frightened. This subject will prescribe some calming medicine and medicine to expel the cold." The eldest princess said, "Since she's fine, why hasn't the princess woken up yet?" The imperial physician said, The princess is a woman. She probably choked on water in a hurry and fainted. But it's not serious. She'll wake up after resting for a while." The eldest princess couldn't help but think of how Yili had carried Princess Lingyun to the surface of the water and had been suddenly pushed by Princess Lingyun. Her expression became even heavier. She nodded and said, "Go and boil the medicine." Chapter 99. Qin bids farewell. There was only Xiaoyang Princess and Mo Shuyao left in the room. Xiaoyang Princess stood and said, Shuyao, take good care of Wang Fei. I will seek justice for Princess Lingyun for Princess Ding. Mo Shuyao nodded faintly, thank you for your trouble, but this matter should be settled after Princess Li wakes up. Xiaoyang Princess sighed and nodded, as you wish. Stay with your Wang Fei. I will leave first. Seeing the eldest princess leave, Mo Shuyao moved his wheelchair forward. He stared at the sleeping woman on the bed for a beat before asking slowly, Princess Li, do you plan on sleeping through tonight's palace banquet? Yi Li's eyelashes trembled slightly and she slowly opened her eyes. How did you know? Mo Shuyao shook his head and said faintly, intuition. Even the grand physician was fooled, how could I know? Thinking back to how the grand physician was puzzled and confused, and could only say in the end that she was unconscious due to shock, Mo Shuyao had a faint smile in his eyes. Princess Li, I never knew that you liked saving people from danger so much. Mo Shuyao looked at Yi Li and said faintly. Yi Li said helplessly, I didn't have a choice. If I didn't save her, it would have been me who pushed her into the water. Mo Shuyao's eyes flashed. Just now outside, Princess Lingyun did insist that you pushed her into the water. Outside, she was really stubborn. She could still make a fuss after that. Yi Li exclaimed. Under the water she had really made a fuss with Princess Lingyun. She didn't think that she would make a fuss when she didn't want to see the grand physician. Thinking about the main culprit of her misfortune, Yi Li's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. She stared at Mo Shuyao's half-exposed handsome face and said, speaking of Prince, today's matter is also because of you. Do you have anything to say? Mo Shuyao raised his eyebrows and looked at her questioningly. Yi Li snorted and said, that Princess Lingyun is infatuated with Prince. She even vowed that she would become the Ding King's princess. Shi Ling's Princess Lingyun? Mo Shuyao frowned. Yi Li stared at him with a dangerous look in her eyes. Don't tell me you really have some kind of promise with this princess? Yi Li asked. How could he kidnap a 7 or 8-year-old girl? Such a bastard, she must beat him to death. Mo Shuyao shook his head and looked at Yi Li seriously. I can confirm that Princess Lingyun and I have never met before. If you haven't met before, why would she cry and make a fuss about marrying you? She even jumped into the lake herself. Could it be because of the Ding King's position? Yi Li didn't understand. She didn't suspect that Mo Shuyao would lie to her on this matter. In fact, the probability of Mo Shuyao and Princess Lingyun knowing each other wasn't high. Logically speaking, marrying into the Ding King's residence doesn't seem to be in the interest of a Shi Ling princess. If Shi Ling wants a marriage alliance, the best choice is to marry Princess Lingyun to the emperor. Mo Shuyao glanced at her and seemed to be surprised. How do you know that Shi Ling wants a marriage alliance? Otherwise, why would they bring a princess over from so far away? To visit? Mo Shuyao said, Shi Ling and our Dechu state have always been at odds. Even if these few years are considered peaceful, everyone knows that sooner or later they will fight. Normally, Shi Ling wouldn't really let a princess come to Dechu state for a political marriage alliance. In this kind of situation, a political marriage alliance was equivalent to a hostage. Once the two countries fought, no matter if you were a princess or a commandery princess, you could only be a pitiful sacrifice. Yi Li frowned. What he said was true. In this kind of situation where both sides knew what was going on, even if the Emperor of Xiling had no place to put his daughters, there was no need to send them to his enemy. Mo Shuyao watched as she leaned against the headboard and frowned, deep in thought. His eyes warmed. Don't think too much. Whether they want a marriage alliance or not, we will know at the palace banquet tonight. When Yi Li and Mo Shuyao walked out, the people who were whispering in the hall immediately fell silent. Clearly, the incident in the imperial garden had alarmed many people. Not only the empress but even the emperor had come. Other than the northern tribes, envoys from other countries also came. Seeing the two of them come out, Mo Shuyao's gaze first fell on Yi Li. After a moment he asked, Prince Ding, how is Princess Ding? Mo Shuyao calmly said, Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. Princess Li is fine. The empress nodded in relief. It's good that Princess Ding is fine. Princess Ding, please sit. The two of them thanked the empress and Yi Li sat down. Opposite them, the crown prince of Xiling Genom of Gojoseon, Lei Tingfeng, stood up and said in a clear voice, Princess Ding Lingyun was frightened just now and accidentally frightened the princess consort. Please forgive her. Before he finished speaking, Princess Lingyun, who was beside him, stood up in pain and shouted, "Royal brother, I already said that she pushed me down." Princess Xiaoyang frowned and looked at Princess Lingyun. Princess, everyone here saw that Princess Ding wanted to save you. Instead, you pushed the exhausted Princess Ding into the water, causing her to faint. Princess Lingyun was so angry that her face turned red. I have a witness. Princess Xiaoyang frowned and said faintly, I know. Princess just said that your maid saw Princess Ding push you into the water with her own eyes. But, to save your performance in front of Ding Wangfei in Feng De Palace and the situation in the water, it would be hard for people to believe your maid's words. Princess Lingyun shrieked, You are saying that this princess is lying. Princess Xiaoyang looked at her calmly. Even though she did not answer, her expression was enough to say, Lingyun, don't make trouble. Lei Tingfeng scolded in a deep voice. Princess Lingyun was so angry that she started crying. She said hatefully, Fine. If you don't believe this princess, then this princess will use my death to prove it. Finishing, she pulled out a golden hairpin from her head and was about to stab it into her heart. Princess, you can't. Lingyun. Lei Tingfeng quickly grabbed Princess Lingyun's arm and snatched the hairpin away. He looked at this willful cousin of his with a headache. At the same time, he looked at Yi Li with some suspicion. Even though this cousin of his loved to make trouble, she had never had such an intense reaction before. Could it be that he had really wronged her? Princess Ding, can you tell me what happened at that time? Lei Tingfeng stared into Yi Li's eyes and asked. Yi Li calmly looked at him and softly said, I also don't know what happened. Princess Lingyun was talking to me when she suddenly fell into the lake. Then I fell down as well. Lei Tingfeng's brows furrowed even tighter. He looked at Yi Li with some vigilance and said, You also fell in? Then do you know how you fell in? Yi Li shook her head. Princess Lingyun suddenly fell down. I was shocked and before I could react, I had already fallen into the lake. Princess Ding seems to know how to swim. Lei Tingfeng said. Yi Li smiled and said, Not really. It's just that I drowned when I was young, so I learned a bit. It's just that I don't have any experience, so. Chapter 100. Yi Li didn't seem to have said anything, but in the ears of everyone present she had said everything. They even smoothly outlined the entire situation in their minds. Everyone had seen with their own eyes that it was Princess Lingyun who had forcefully pulled Princess Ding to talk to her. The two must have been talking about something unpleasant, and Princess Lingyun had accidentally fallen into the lake in her excitement, bringing Princess Ding down with her. If that was all, it would be fine to treat it as an accident. However, Princess Ding had clearly saved Princess Lingyun. Who would have thought that Princess Lingyun would repay kindness with enmity and push Princess Ding into the water, causing Princess Ding to faint? Furthermore, while the victim was unconscious, she claimed that the other party had pushed her into the water. Instantly, everyone in the hall looked at Princess Lingyun and the envoy of West Hill differently. The nobles of Dechu State already didn't have a good impression of the people of West Hill. Now they were even more displeased. What kind of conduct did the people of West Hill have? Actually, Princess Lingyun doesn't have to seek death like this. After all, this is the palace of Dechu State. If something happens to the Princess of West Hill, wouldn't it hurt the friendship between West Hill and Dechu State? Although I am a woman, I definitely won't do something that will harm the peace between the two countries. Yi Li looked at Princess Lingyun and said calmly, But I am a little confused. Princess Lingyun and I came from the Imperial Garden. We both left our maids behind. Logically speaking, in that position, no matter if the princess fell or I pushed her down, your maids wouldn't be able to see it unless they were standing by the lake. How did they see me push the princess down with their own eyes? Your Majesty, could you please summon my maid and Princess Lingyun's maids in? The emperor glanced at Mo Jingqi. Seeing that he didn't object, he nodded and said, We'll do as you say. Qing Luan and the others soon came in, along with the maids that Princess Lingyun brought from the West Hill. In the end, it was Xiaoyang princess who asked, Were you with the princess and the princess at that time? Qing Yu took a step forward and said, Reporting to the princess at that time, Princess Lingyun said that she wanted to speak with our princess consort alone and took the initiative to dismiss her own palace maids. Thus, Princess consort ordered us servants not to follow. The Sunshine eldest princess raised her eyebrows and continued to ask, "Then, did you see what happened by the lake?" Qing Yu shook her head and said, "There is a rockery between the lakeside and the imperial garden. We were a little further away and were blocked by the rockery, so we didn't see what happened." Princess Lingyun's maid stepped forward and said, "We saw it. It was Princess Ding who pushed our princess down." Xiaoyang princess said, "I also know about the rockery by the lake. I used to play in it when I was young. If you were standing behind the rockery, you definitely wouldn't have seen what happened by the lake." "We weren't behind the rockery," the maid blurted out. Xiaoyang princess raised her eyebrows and looked at Princess Lingyun with a faint smile, asking, "Oh, then where were you at that time?" "We were by the peach forest by the lake." The maid seemed to feel that she had said something wrong. She glanced at the West Hill in a panic and reluctantly answered. Xiaoyang princess nodded. "If you were there, you could have seen it. But I want to know, why did you, who should have been waiting behind, walk around almost half of the imperial garden and appear by the peach forest?" "I remember that there is a small river between the peach forest and the rockery by the lake. The bridge seems to be a bit far." This, in front of so many people and the emperor and empress of Dechu state, the maid didn't dare to not answer the eldest princess. She could only say, "Yes. Princess wants us to go there." "Go there?" Xiaoyang princess smiled and said, "Go there for what? If it was in March, it would make sense to pick a few peach blossoms. But it's almost June now. Normal people wouldn't go there." The maid wanted to ask Princess Lingyun for help in a panic. However, at this time, Princess Lingyun couldn't think of any reason to justify herself. She could only argue, no matter how Ai's maid got there, at least it proves that they saw Ai being pushed into the lake. The eldest princess was born in the palace and wasn't easy to fool. Her phoenix eyes stared at the maid and said, "Since you said that Princess Ding pushed Princess Lingyun, then how did Princess Ding push her?" At the time, was Princess Lingyun facing Princess Ding from the front, back or side? Did Princess Ding use her left hand or right hand to push her? Did Princess Lingyun call out when Princess Ding pushed her into the water? She did. What did she call out? The maid's face froze. After a while she said, "We remember. The princess back was facing Princess Ding. Princess Ding. Princess Ding used her left and right hand to push the princess. After the princess was pushed in, she was still screaming for help." On the side, Lei Tingfeng's face sunk. He cursed in his heart for being an idiot. The Sun eldest princess expression changed and she said in a stern voice, "Impudent. You dare to lie in front of the emperor and empress." The guards that were patrolling the lake said that they didn't hear any cries for help. They only rushed over because they heard your cries. When they saw the ripples on the water, they knew someone had fallen into the water. Why did you hear Princess Lingyun's cries for help? Or is it because your martial arts are better than the guards in the palace? I. The maid forced herself to make up a long string of answers. She was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Being scolded by the eldest princess, her body turned soft and she immediately fell to the ground. "Princess, have mercy, this servant is—" "Shut up," Lei Tingfeng suddenly said. "You clearly didn't hear Ling Yun's cries for help. If the eldest princess asks, just answer honestly. Don't add oil to the fire and say things that aren't true." The maid was stunned. She quickly nodded and said, "Yes. This servant knows her mistake. This servant didn't hear the princess cries for help." Lei Tingfeng turned around and smiled at Yili as he cupped his fists and said, "Wang Fei, please forgive her. This girl has been with Ling Yun since she was young and hasn't seen much. She was nervous and must have misjudged Wang Fei. Ling Yun has always trusted this girl. Today she was frightened and misled by her. Wang Fei, please forgive her." Yili looked at Ling Yun's expression that refused to admit her mistake. She smiled coldly. "Shizi's words are too serious. It's not a big deal. It's just, this is the first time this consort attends a palace banquet, and this kind of mistake has really shamed the Ding Palace. Maybe Princess Lingyun's words are reasonable. Princess, don't you think so?" Princess Lingyun snorted and turned her head away from Yili. Princess Ronghua, who was sitting beside Princess Xiaoyang, suddenly raised her eyebrows and smiled, asking, "What did Princess Lingyun say to make Princess Ding agree?" Yili faintly sighed and said, "This consort is so rude that she has lost the face of the Ding Palace and the prince. Maybe tomorrow Prince will give this consort a letter of divorce. This Princess Ding will probably be replaced." The Empress softly scolded, Nonsense, this is just an accident. How can Prince Ding be so unreasonable? Chapter 101. Emo Xiuyao, who had been sitting idly and watching the show, nodded with a solemn expression. What the Empress said is right. He tilted his head and smiled at Yili. Rest assured, Princess Li, no matter what happens, you will always be my Ding royal household's legitimate Fei. Whoever dares to question Princess Li is questioning my Ding royal household. Xiaoyang Princess also smiled. Xiuyao's words are right. Whoever dares to question Princess Ding is going against Princess Ding. You just need to be at ease. Everyone knows that you have been wronged today. Prince Wang Fei, imperial sister, is insensible and has misunderstood Wang Fei. This humble one will apologize on her behalf. Please forgive her, Wang Fei. Yili lowered her eyes and did not speak. She had a respectful expression as if she was waiting for the prince to make the decision. Emo Xiuyao faintly said, things like apologizing should be done by the person involved to show more sincerity. Don't you think so? Lei Tingfeng was stunned. Emo Xiuyao wanting Ling Yun to apologize personally was completely slapping Ling Yun's face. He was not willing to leave her any face. Looking thoughtfully at Yili, Lei Tingfeng said, Ling Yun is still young. As her elder brother, I have not taught her well. I should apologize personally. Emo Xiuyao raised his eyebrows and the corners of his lips slightly lifted. Perhaps heir should teach the princess what it means to be responsible for one's own actions and how to be responsible for one's own actions. Today's matter, can I see it as Xi Ling's provocation towards my Ding royal household? Princess Ling Yun was reprimanded by the person she had admired for a long time. Her eyes had long turned red from being wronged. Lei Tingfeng's heart jumped. If he knew that Emo Xiuyao's attitude would be so unyielding, he would have directly dragged Princess Ling Yun to apologize from the start. Losing face was better than losing his life. Ling Yun would definitely stay in East Chu. If she offended Emo Xiuyao, he could still protect her while she was in East Chu. If he left, she wouldn't even know how she died. Today's matter, Lei Tingfeng believed that it was Ling Yun who wanted to target Ding Wang Fei. But if it was said that this Ding Wang Fei was innocent, Lei Tingfeng would never believe it. What was worse was that Emo Xiuyao directly raised the issue of Xiling Kingdom's attitude towards King Ding's residence. Although Emo Xiuyao was currently crippled, the Ding King's residence's power and the Black Cloud cavalry that could cause the entire world to tremble were still around. It would be fine if Emo Xiuyao was a bit weaker, but Emo Xiuyao's unyielding attitude made him even more fearful. Xiling Nation did not need war at the moment. Ling Yun apologized to Princess Ding. Almost immediately, Lei Tingfeng made a prompt decision to Princess Ling Yun. What? You want me to apologize to her? Princess Ling Yun screamed. Everyone present could not help but frown. Even Princess Rong Hua disdainfully curled her lips. Even if she was known as the most arrogant princess in the capital, she would absolutely disdain to be so rude in this kind of situation. The upbringing of Xiling Kingdom's princess really made people have a whole new level of respect for her. Princess Ling Yun bitterly glared at Yili and said, why should this princess apologize to her? I am the most honorable princess of Xiling. Can she accept this princess apology? Yili frowned. Princess is not willing to apologize because you look down on this consort? What do you have that makes this princess look down on you? Princess Ling Yun arrogantly raised her chin and squinted at Yili. These days she had already inquired about Yili. She was the daughter of the minister's mansion who had been neglected for many years. She was also the famous daughter of the third generation in the capital. She had no talent, no virtue and no appearance. Even Prince Li could not bear her reputation and abandoned her. She was just lucky that the emperor appointed her to Prince Ding. As for the matter of being the champion of the 100-Flower Festival, in Princess Ling Yun's eyes, it was not worth the slightest attention. Yili was just lucky. Yili's eyes flashed with a trace of cold light. She kept comforting herself in her heart. She is still young, I don't need to lower myself to her level. Damn it, she is still young. This girl needs to be taught a lesson. If she was still in the army, she would have already been peeled off a layer of skin. Then, is Princess looking down on Ben Fei or looking down on the status of Ding Wang Fei? Yili asked. You are not worthy of Princess Ding's status at all. Princess Ling Yun shouted. Yili pursed her lips and looked at Princess Ling Yun with a smile. Everyone present couldn't help but praise her good temper and self-restraint in their hearts. Then who does Princess think is worthy of the status of Princess Ding? If you have the nerve to say that you are this lady, then this princess will submit to you. Princess Lingyun choked and quickly looked at Emo Xiuyao. It was a pity that the falling flowers intended to fall but the flowing water did not. Emo Xiuyao only had a faint smile as he looked at the Wang Fei beside him. He did not detect Princess Lingyun's resentful gaze at all. Even if Princess Lingyun could announce her intentions for Princess Ding's position in front of Yili, she did not have the face to say that only she was worthy of Prince Ding in front of so many people. It was Yili who clicked her tongue in wonder at her resentful expression. This girl had never seen Emo Xiuyao before, but the first time she saw him she could show such deep affection. If it was 8 years ago, Emo Xiuyao could say that it was love at first sight, but the current Emo Xiuyao lacked the conditions to make people fall in love at first sight. Could hero worship really make a young girl this infatuated? Even if it was like this, shouldn't she worship the heroes of her own country? Or was this princess a person without borders? If it was in the past, it wouldn't matter if princess looked down on me. But now, this Fei cannot let the Ding Palace's ancestors be shamed because of this Fei. Yili stared at Princess Lingyun as she spoke. Princess Lingyun arrogantly said, "This princess will definitely apologize to a person who is not as good as this princess." Yili raised an eyebrow. Previously the princess invited this Fei to a duel, but this Fei declined. Why don't we duel again? If this Fei loses today's matter, it will be this Fei pushing down the official and will be dealt with by the princess. If the princess loses, impossible. Princess Lingyun said, "This princess will definitely not lose to you." Yili ignored her and continued, "I want the princess to kneel and apologize in front of all the officials and women at the palace banquet." Alright, this princess agrees. Before Lei Tingfeng could stop her, Lingyun had already raised her voice. "If you lose, this princess wants you to bow 3 times and kowtow 9 times from the palace entrance to the most bustling place in the capital and then admit to everyone that you are not worthy to be Princess Ding." Yili indifferently nodded her head. "It's a promise." "Wait." Xiaoyang princess stood up and said, "I remember that Princess Ding does not know how to use the sword." Yili smiled and said, "Princess is right, so we will not duel with the sword, we will duel with the arrow. I believe that Princess Lingyun will also know how to do it, right?" "Huh. You want to duel with this princess in archery?" Princess Lingyun acted as if she heard a joke as she looked at Yili with disdain and laughed out loud. This princess learned archery at the age of 7 and could shoot without missing at the age of 10. Can you even draw the bow?" Yili lowered her brows and smiled faintly. "Does the princess mean that we will not compete? This princess is afraid that you will lose too badly. Since you overestimate yourself, this princess will fulfill your wish. Tell me, how do you want to compete?" Yili smiled in satisfaction and stood up to say to Emo Jingqi and the Empress, "Then I will have to trouble the Emperor and the Empress to be witnesses." Emo Jingqi looked at her and asked, "Princess Ding, have you made up your mind? You must consider it carefully." Yili smiled. "Please, Your Majesty, grant my wish. The dignity of the Ding Palace cannot be trampled on." Chapter 102. Emo Jingqi's expression changed. He stared at Yili for a long time before he said in a low voice, "Okay, I approve." Yili respectfully bowed. "Yili thanks Your Majesty for granting my wish." Then she turned to Princess Lingyun and smiled. "Princess, please." Princess Lingyun turned and walked out of the hall. Yili's smile was calm and gentle. She walked forward slowly. Lei Tingfeng, who was following behind, looked at the woman's straight and firm back. For some reason he had a bad feeling in his heart. An open space in the imperial garden was crowded with people. Even in the distance, there were many idle palace maids and eunuchs peeking at the rare lively scene in the palace. Emo Jingqi and the Empress brought the palace concubines, as well as the officials and noble ladies who came to the palace banquet to be witnesses for Princess Ding and Princess Lingyun. The imperial garden was unprecedentedly noisy. There were too many people. Except for the Emperor, the Empress, the concubines and a few prominent members of the royal family, the others could only stand and watch. But obviously no one cared about this small matter. Everyone was excitedly staring at the 2 people in the open space. Princess Ding didn't ask for a target. How would she compete? Noble consort Lu sat beside the Emperor with a cold face. Her cold eyes swept over Yili with a hint of inquiry. Emo Jingqi lowered his head to look at his beloved consort's expression. He chuckled softly. What are you looking at? It seems that you like Princess Ding very much? Noble consort Lu frowned and said coldly, Your Majesty must be joking. I was just a little curious. Emo Jingqi smiled meaningfully. There are not many people who can make you curious. But in my opinion, Princess Ding has no chance of winning. Noble consort Lu raised her eyebrows. She still looked as cold as ice. Emo Jingqi's eyes flashed with a trace of fierceness and darkness. He continued, Princess Lingyun is the beloved daughter of the Emperor Xiling. Since young she has been practicing both civil and martial arts. In the West Hill her archery is more famous than her swordsmanship. What's in it for His Majesty if she loses? Noble consort Lu said lightly. Emo Jingqi smiled but did not speak. He turned his gaze to Emo Shuyao who was sitting quietly not far away. His eyes darkened. Prince. Beside Emo Shuyao, Qing Shuang looked anxiously at Yi Li who was preparing for the match. After following her mistress for so many years, how could Frost not know that her mistress had never learned archery? At most she could only play with the third master when she went to the Su family. How could it compare to the archery that Princess Lingyun had been practicing since she was a child? Emo Shuyao said indifferently, Don't be impatient. Lei Tingfeng frowned as he looked at Emo Shuyao's calm expression. Could it be that Princess Ding really had some sort of trump card? But no matter if she won or lost, there was no benefit to the West Hill. Lei Tingfeng could not help but curse in his heart. Was his imperial uncle muddle-headed? Why did he choose Lingyun to come to Dongchu? Even the Emperor of Shiling's least favored princess was 100 times more sensible than this girl. Prince Ding, this is all because of Ling Yun's ignorance. I heard that Princess Ding is the most talented woman in the capital, but she's not good at martial arts. Isn't this competition a little unfair to the princess consort? Emo Shuyao smiled lightly. Since it's Li's choice, it doesn't matter whether it's fair or not. Isn't it? But what if the princess? Was Emo Shuyao certain that Princess Ding would win, or did he not care about losing face for the Ding kingdom? If Li loses, I will kneel with her to Princess Lingyun. Emo Shuyao calmly replied. Lei Tingfeng's heart shook when he heard this. He almost could not hide the loss of self-control on his face. He turned his gaze to the beautiful woman in the field who was wearing the same moon-white brocade robe as Prince Ding. His hand unconsciously tightened around the wine cup as his gaze deepened and his handsome brows furrowed. In the field, Yi Li and Princess Lingyun were both inspecting the bows in their hands. Princess Lingyun's movements were nimble as she inspected her bow. It was clear that she was an archer from the capital. On the other hand, Yi Li was leisurely inspecting the bow in her hands. She was testing here and there. The surrounding people could not help but feel anxious for her. Princess Ding's slender figure and her slow and jerky movements made people wonder if Princess Ding could even draw the bow. Don't mention shooting an arrow, it was another matter if Princess Ding could even draw the bow. Say it, how do you want to compete? Princess Lingyun was already prepared. She raised her chin and looked at Yi Li arrogantly. Yi Li quickly put down her bow and looked up at Princess Lingyun with a smile. 1 arrow for each person. 1 arrow to determine the winner. Whatever. Princess Lingyun held her bow and said, Say it, where should I shoot? Do you want to shoot a willow leaf from 100 paces away or a bird in the sky? Hearing Princess Lingyun's words, everyone was even more shocked. They had a deeper understanding of the princess's archery skills. To be able to say that she could shoot a willow leaf from 100 paces away so confidently, this princess was indeed an expert. Hua Tianxiang stood behind Madame Hua and tightly clutched her sleeves. She was worried for Yi Li. Yi Li slowly drew her bow and said indifferently, Bows and arrows are weapons. They are not used to shoot leaves and birds. So, let's compete in shooting. After she finished speaking, she raised her bow and pointed an arrow at Princess Lingyun. What? Everyone was shocked. They watched as the girl used a standard but not practiced posture to point her bow and arrow at Princess Lingyun. Are you crazy? Are you kidding me? Princess Lingyun cried out involuntarily. They were standing less than 50 paces away from each other. Lingyun was an expert archer. She could naturally see that Yi Li's posture was unfamiliar, but she had definitely learned it before. At this distance, whether it was her or Yi Li, the chances of them missing were not high. So Yi Li didn't want to compete in archery. Instead she wanted to compete in courage. Yili said with a faint smile. Whether it is a sword or an arrow, they are all weapons. Soldiers are lethal weapons. Since this is a competition, we naturally can't harm others. So we can only trouble Princess Lingyun and this consort to shoot an arrow at each other. Death. Injury. Responsibility. No. She didn't want to marry the emperor and become one of the concubines in the imperial harem. She wanted to marry Prince Ding and become Princess Ding. However, she didn't want to die, nor did she want to experience the feeling of being shot by an arrow. Princess Ding. Isn't this a bit too serious? Something happens. Lei Tingfeng stood up to stop her. Yili turned her head to look at him and said with a smile, didn't this consort say that she would be responsible for her own injuries? Moreover, the emperor has already agreed to this consort's competition with Princess Lingyun. Could it be that the heir wants this consort to go back on her words in front of the emperor, empress, and all the officials of Dichu state? How will my Ding King's manor have the face to stand in the capital? Lei Tingfeng felt bitter in his heart. You didn't say that you wanted to bet your life first. Of course, if Princess Lingyun is afraid, she can admit defeat at any time. In the end, Yili lightly added in a sentence. This sentence had undoubtedly blocked all of Princess Lingyun's paths of retreat. How could she admit defeat to Yili in front of all these people? She took advantage of her unwillingness to admit defeat to blurt out, this princess will not admit defeat. This princess will bet. Very good, let's begin. Yili nodded with a satisfied smile. She didn't know why, but Princess Lingyun didn't dare look into her eyes and looked away in a panic. Chapter 103. Mo Jingqi was also caught off guard by this sudden change. Noble consort Lu looked at Yili's figure, her eyes revealing a trace of admiration. I think Princess Ding has a good chance of winning. The Empress also knew that although noble consort Lu was born in a family of civil officials, she was a rare woman who was both civil and military. She asked curiously, Noble consort, do you think Princess Ding will win? Noble consort Lu said, this Princess Lingyun is not as bold as she appears. In that case, let's do as Princess Ding says. Mo Jingqi stood up. One arrow to determine the winner. If you miss or dodge, you lose. Let's begin. The imperial garden suddenly fell into silence. The eunuch who acted as the host stood in the middle of the two and screamed, Princess consort, please get ready. Then he quickly walked out of the field. 1. The two drew their bows at the same time. What was surprising was that the elegant and graceful Princess Ding did not seem to have much difficulty pulling the bow. 2. Princess Lingyun pulled the bow to the extreme, aiming the arrow at the woman opposite her. She had absolute confidence that as long as she shot this arrow, this Princess Ding who overestimated herself would definitely die. As long as she shot this arrow. Suddenly, Princess Lingyun's hand that held the arrow trembled slightly. She clearly saw the eyes of the woman opposite her. The eyes as cold as snow made her heart fall into an ice cellar in an instant. In Princess Lingyun's eyes, Yili seemed to have changed into another person. Her whole body was filled with an unstoppable murderous aura and confidence that she would definitely succeed in one shot. She only looked at her calmly as if she did not care about the arrow aimed at her at all. It was as if she was certain that the arrow would not hit her at all. The more she thought about it, the more Princess Lingyun's eyes involuntarily looked at the tip of Yili's arrow. With some despair, she found that if she did not dodge, even if Yili was a novice, that arrow would definitely hit her. Princess Lingyun's forehead was already sweating profusely. Yili calmly enjoyed the feeling of the bow and arrow in her hands. Although it still wasn't as smooth as the sniper rifle she had been using for so many years, this was her first time in this world having a shooting duel. Even if it was just teasing a little girl, she still couldn't help but feel a little happier and happier. Looking in the direction of the arrow, he could clearly see the unconcealable fear in Princess Lingyun's eyes. His lips curled into a faint smile. Almost everyone held their breaths as they waited for the final moment to arrive. Lei Tingfeng stared intently at Princess Lingyun. Because of the direction, he couldn't see Yili's face, but from her posture he could tell that Yili wasn't familiar with this kind of bow. With Ling Yun's ability, she should have a 90% chance of winning. Why was she so nervous? Mo Shuyao calmly sat in his wheelchair. His hands rested on the armrests, but if someone looked closely, they would discover that there was something hidden under his right hand. His gaze also fell on Princess Lingyun, But it wasn't on Princess Lingyun's face. It was on the tip of her arrow. I won't lose. Princess Lingyun tried her best not to look at Yi Li's arrow. She secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva and kept encouraging herself in her heart. But her eyes kept unconsciously drifting to Yi Li's arrow. 3. A sharp sound rang in her ears. Lingyun could clearly see Yi Li's smile deepen. Her hand pulled back on the bow, preparing to release the arrow. She had already pulled the bowstring to the maximum and released it out of reflex. Whoosh! The arrow brushed past Yi Li's shoulder and landed not far behind her. How could this be? Princess Lingyun was stunned. What was even more shocking was that Yi Li hadn't released the arrow and she had already lost her chance. She stared blankly at Yi Li's smiling face. She could clearly see that she was silently smiling at her. It's my turn. She could clearly see that there was no smile in that smiling face. There was only coldness and killing intent that was colder than the tip of the arrow. She saw Yi Li slowly pull the bowstring to the limit and release the arrow. Whoosh! No! Lingyun suddenly screamed. She didn't even care about her image as she hugged her head and squatted on the ground. The arrow stabbed into the ground one step away from her. Princess Lingyun stared blankly at the faintly swaying arrow in front of her. Suddenly she burst into tears. Everyone exchanged glances. Yi Li leisurely put down the bow in her hands. She smiled at Princess Lingyun and said, Princess, actually my hand is very sore. You don't have to worry that I'll shoot you. Princess Lingyun cried so hard that her snot couldn't form a sound. She pointed at Yi Li but couldn't speak for a long time. Yi Li smiled at her. She only felt that all the depression she had suffered today was released in an instant. Sure enough, teaching a disobedient brat was the best way to put him in a good mood. Good. Emo Jingqi clapped his hands and smiled. This competition will definitely be won by the princess consort. What does the heir think? Lei Tingfeng's expression was complicated as he looked at the smiling woman not far away. He stood up and said, the princess consort is indeed a woman who doesn't lose to men. This one is sincerely convinced. Naturally the princess consort wins. Lingyun kneeled down and apologized to the princess consort. Lei Tingfeng made a prompt decision and said to Princess Lingyun. Yi Li's request was to apologize in front of all the officials at the palace banquet. However, Lei Tingfeng directly cut off the second half of her sentence and had Lingyun immediately apologize. This would make people feel that the Xiling princess dared to admit what she had done. Moreover, Lingyun was crying so miserably right now it would make people sympathize with her. When it came to the palace banquet at night, everyone would tactfully not mention this matter again. However, if it was dragged to the palace banquet, the news of Lingyun losing to the princess consort would have spread throughout the palace. After everyone gossiped for a while, their evaluation of Lingyun would be even lower. Even if Lingyun kneeled down and apologized, no one would have a good impression of her. More importantly, it would affect his actions later. Kneel. Princess Lingyun's face turned white. She never would have thought that she would lose to a weak Eastern Chu girl in the field she was most proud of. Thinking of the promise she had made in the heat of the moment, it was too late to regret it now. She looked at Lei Tingfeng for help, but all she received was Lei Tingfeng's warning gaze. Looking at the surrounding people, the Eastern Chu emperor, empress, concubines, ministers and noblewomen as well as the Nanzhao envoy and princess. Princess Lingyun knew that if she really kneeled down her reputation would be completely ruined. There's no need to kneel. Princess only needs to apologize to this consort. Yi Li suddenly spoke. Princess Lingyun was stunned. She finally understood that there was no benefit in continuing to cause trouble. She was weak in Eastern Chu and her royal brother was not willing to help her. He could not beat this Princess Ding at all. Gritting her teeth, Princess Lingyun slightly bowed and said, "It was Lingyun who was insensible and offended Princess Ding. Princess Ding, please forgive this offense." Yi Li nodded with a faint smile and said, "Princess is a guest, there is no need to take it to heart." After saying this, she turned around and ignored Princess Lingyun, walking towards Emo Xiuyao. Emo Xiuyao lowered his eyes and the thing under his right hand disappeared. He then raised his head to look at Yi Li in front of him. Although Yi Li's expression was as gentle and indifferent as usual, Emo Xiuyao was certain that he saw a different light in her eyes. Chapter 104. Lei Tingfeng cupped his hands towards Yi Li, silently expressing his thanks. Yili nodded slightly, sitting down beside Emo Shuyao. She tried her best to ignore the gazes from all around her. Princess Lingyun returned to Lei Tingfeng's side in a daze, no longer in the mood to find trouble with Yili. Feeling Emo Xuyao's gaze on her, Yili raised her head, asking in confusion, "What's wrong?" Emo Xuyao calmly said, "It was very dangerous just now. If it wasn't for the fact that Princess Lingyun's mind was unstable, if it was any other ordinary archer, that arrow would have directly hit Yili's body. At best it would have resulted in both sides suffering heavy injuries." Yili shook her head, shrugging her shoulders and smiling. "There won't be any danger. If not for Princess Lingyun, I wouldn't have competed with her in archery." The reason why she chose archery was because she knew that Princess Lingyun's mind was not enough to compete with a sniper, even if it was only for a short moment. Even though she was born in the palace, the arrogant and willful little princess was protected. There was no way she could maintain a calm standard in front of her. Of course, if Princess Lingyun's hand really did not tremble and directly shot the arrow at her, she had other ways to deal with it. Besides, Prince won't let anything happen to me, right? Seeing Emo Xuyao's disapproving gaze, Yili smiled faintly. Emo Xuyao was startled, nodding lightly. "You're right. If Princess Lingyun's arrow had not missed, he would not have let that arrow land on Li's body." "Princess Ding, have you learned archery before?" Emo Jingqi asked in a clear voice from the main seat. Yili stood up, replying respectfully, "Reporting to your majesty, I haven't. It's just that when I went to uncle's house, brother taught me for fun. I've never studied it seriously." Emo Jingqi smiled meaningfully. Yili was able to win against Princess Lingyun, who had studied for many years, even though she had never studied seriously. Her talent and intelligence were both very good. Emo Jingqi held noble consort Lu in his arms and said with a smile, "It seems that Princess Ding and my beloved consort are both extraordinary women skilled in both pen and sword." Noble consort Lu replied lightly, "You're right, your majesty." After sending off the emperor, empress and Gui Fei, Yili was too lazy to pay attention to the people who came up to compliment or test her. Together with Emo Xuyao, she found a quiet place to rest in the imperial garden. Most people were tactful enough to not disturb the couple, but there were always one or two exceptions. After rejecting the palace maid sent by Yi Jiaoyi to invite her to the small gathering, Yili looked at Emo Xuyao, who had been staring at her. She smiled and said, "Prince, what's wrong?" Emo Xuyao held the teacup in one hand, casually playing with it. He said, "Li is very talented in martial arts. Seems that her foundation is also good." Yili did not mind that her skills were known by Emo Xuyao. Emo Xuyao was a very cautious and seemingly gentle person, but he was very guarded. It was almost impossible for her not to be known by him after living in the same manner for a long time. Yili did not plan to hide it. She needed space to train herself and even learn more powerful things to strengthen her abilities. Meeting Emo Xuyao's eyes, Yili smiled innocently. "If Prince thinks it's not bad, then it should be really not bad." Emo Xuyao clearly did not intend to get to the bottom of the matter. He smiled and shook his head. "Fleely likes, there are some martial arts manuals in the study. You can take them to read." Seeing Yi Li's eyes light up at his words, Emo Xuyao continued with a smile. "Since Li says she doesn't know swordsmanship, I can find someone to teach Li. Is that really okay? The better Li can protect herself, the more assured I will be. Why not?" Emo Xuyao said with a smile. Yili instantly felt that marrying a wealthy, understanding and open-minded husband was too fortunate. "Great, thank you," Yili said with a smile. Emo Xuyao shook his head lightly. "We are family. If you need anything you can tell me directly. There is no need to thank me." Seeing the sincere smile on Yili's face that he had never seen before, Emo Xuyao couldn't help but feel that finding someone to teach Li swordsmanship was not a bad idea. The palace banquet in the evening proceeded in a strange atmosphere. When Yili and Emo Xuyao entered the hall together, all eyes in the hall immediately focused on her. Clearly, the competition in the Imperial Garden in the afternoon had caused Yili to be in the limelight. In just one short afternoon, not only had the officials in the Imperial Garden appeared, but everyone at the banquet had heard of what had happened in the afternoon. Seeing Murong Ting winking at her while sitting with Qin Zheng and Su Qingfeng's undisguised praise, Yili had no doubt that this matter had spread throughout the capital. But she didn't know how it would spread. Would they say that Princess Ding was skilled in both the pen and the sword, or that Princess Ding was so valiant that she scared the arrogant Princess of Xiling to tears. Thinking of the latter possibility, Yili couldn't help but lower her head and laugh. The so-called palace banquet was nothing more than good wine and food, singing and dancing to celebrate peace. Yili listlessly listened to the polite exchanges between the emperor and the foreign envoys, or the whispers of the officials at the side. She saw some dishes that she liked to eat. In any case, she could not expect to be full from the food at this banquet. She could just wait until she returned to the food to eat a midnight snack. Until a bright red dress appeared in the middle of the singing and dancing in the hall, Yili looked at the beautiful dancing in the hall with some surprise. She tilted her head and asked, "Why is Yaoji here?" Emo Xiuyao chuckled softly and said, "They must have specially invited her to perform in the palace. Yaoji was born in the musical house and her dancing skills are the best in the capital. Last year at the Empress Dowager's birthday, she was specially invited to perform in the palace." Yili raised her eyebrows and asked, "Prince, what do you think?" Emo Xiuyao said, "Of course it's good. What do you think, Li?" Yili looked back for a long time and nodded, "It's indeed good." She had heard of Yaoji's reputation. It could be said that she was a wonderful woman in the capital. She was born in the musical house and amazed the capital with her zither skills and dancing skills. She became the owner of the #1 brothel in the capital before the age of 25. She had contacts with many dignitaries in the capital. It was said that Mu Yang, the heir of Marquis Mu Yang, was her guest. Young Master Feng Sen also called her a friend. Since ancient times, only such a woman could live in such a carefree and unrestrained manner in such an era. The dance of the #1 prostitute in the capital was naturally amazing. At a glance, at least 70% of the men present showed a covetous look. And the women also showed a look of jealousy and resentment. Naturally, there were also people who looked at him with pure admiration, but only a very small number of people. After the dance, Yaoji quickly disappeared outside the hall, leaving only a touch of fragrance that made people reluctant to leave. Looking at the bustling people in the hall with different expressions, Yili only felt more bored. After telling Emo Xiuyao that she wanted to go out to get some fresh air, Yili quietly left the hall with Qing Wan and Qing Shuang. The night wind outside the hall blew gently, gradually dispersing the smell of rouge and wine from the hall. Yili took a deep breath. Ignoring the music in the hall, the imperial palace was exceptionally quiet at night. Walking slowly on the quiet path, Yili's restless mood gradually calmed down. When she was about to sit in the pavilion in front, a strange palace maid blocked their way. "Greetings, Princess Ding." Chapter 105. Qing Wan stood in front of Yili vigilantly and asked, "Who are you?" The palace maid bowed and said, "This servant is Yi Zhaoyi's palace maid. Yi Zhaoyi invites Ding Wangfei to Yaohua Palace for a chat." Yi was pregnant, so she did not attend the banquet in the evening. In the afternoon she sent a palace maid to invite, but Yili declined her invitation on the spot. Yili naturally knew Yiyu's thoughts, but even if they were sisters she did not intend to let Yiyu and the Yi family use her. The main reason was that Yiyu's plans and ideas were too unreliable. If she was careful and knew her place, she might be able to give birth to the child safely and have someone to rely on in the future. Even if she had only seen her a few times, Yili still felt that the pregnant Yiyu was not as pampered as the Yi family thought. "This consort is a little tired today. Tell Yi Zhaoyi that if there is anything, this consort will go to the palace to pay respects in 2 days and then talk with her. Let's forget about it today." The palace maid looked a little anxious and said, "Forgive me, Wangfei. Zhaoyi Nyang does have something urgent to discuss with Wangfei." Yili said lightly, "Even if there is something urgent, I'm afraid it's useless to discuss it with this consort. By the way, Yi Zhaoyi's mother Wang Furen is also in the hall at this time. Why don't this consort ask someone to help you invite her out? What do you think?" Wangfei Zhaoyi Nyang only asks Wangfei to go and have an audience. The palace maid said. When she said the word have an audience, there was a hint of coercion. Yi Li's face sank and she sneered and said indifferently, "I don't know that a Zhaoyi needs I to go and have an audience with her in the middle of the night." The word have an audience was emphasized. The status of Ding Wangfei was very honorable. Even in the palace she only needed to bow to the Empress and Empress Dowager. The Gui Fei only received half a bow. Not to mention a mere Zhaoyi. If they really met, Yi would have to bow to Yili to show respect to the Ding Wang Fu. Newbie misspoke. Wang Fei, please forgive me. Yi Jiaoyi does have an urgent matter. Please, Wang Fei, for the sake of Jiaoyi's sister, go there. Yili looked suspiciously at the palace maid and slowly said, speaking of which, this consort has been to Yaohua Palace before. You seem a little unfamiliar. The palace maid forced a smile and said, this servant's appearance is average. Wang Fei might not remember me. Yili shook her head and said, that's not right. This consort is sure that you are not one of Yi Jiaoyi's 6 senior palace maids and 8 palace maids in the inner palace. Is it possible that Yi Jiaoyi will send a sweeping maid to invite this consort? The palace maid panicked and turned to leave. Yili winked at Qing Wan. Qing Wan stepped forward and effortlessly gave her a chop on the back of her neck. The palace maid's body went limp and fell to the ground. Princess consort. Qing Yu frowned and looked up at Yili, waiting for instructions. Yili frowned slightly and suddenly turned to look at the flowers on the side of the road. Who is it? Princess Ding. A slender figure came out. Under the moonlight, the enchanting face added a sense of calmness. Miss Yaoji. Yili said, why are you here? Yaoji smiled sweetly and said, I don't dare to call myself Mississippi Princess. Ding can call me Yaoji. Yaoji came forward and glanced at the palace maid who was unconscious on the ground. She raised her eyebrows and smiled. Princess Ding, this is? Yili smiled and said, didn't Miss Yaoji hear it just now? It's nothing. There are always a few strange things in the palace. She waved her hand and a black shadow appeared behind Yili like a ghost. Princess consort. Yili pointed to the palace maid on the ground and said, take her away. Don't scare her. The black shadow nimbly picked her up and disappeared into the night after a few leaps. I heard from Feng Sen that Princess Ding is straightforward. Seeing you today, you really live up to your reputation. Yaoji smiled and said, young Master Feng Sen has mentioned me to Miss? She remembered that she wasn't familiar with the famous young Master Feng San. Yaoji covered her mouth and smiled, her eyes shining. Feng San has a high opinion of Princess Consort. Yaoji has always admired his taste. It is a blessing of 3 lifetimes to see Princess Consort today. Yili lowered her eyes and smiled. It is Yaoji's fortune to see Miss Yaoji dance. I will keep what happened just now a secret for Princess Consort. Yaoji blinked her eyes and asked with a bit of naughtiness on her enchanting face. Yili smiled and said, thank you. Why is Miss still here so late? Yaoji sighed helplessly and said, some people and things are too annoying. I just want to find a place to hide. I didn't think I would be fated to meet Princess Consort. Yili understood. Yaoji was beautiful and skilled. There must be many people present who were lustful. But those who dared to pester in the imperial palace weren't simple characters. How about I send someone to escort Miss out of the palace? Yaoji showed a grateful expression and said, thank you, Princess Consort. It's nothing. Turning back to give some orders to Qingyu, Yili bid farewell to Yaoji and returned to the hall filled with singing and dancing. Emo Shuyao saw her return and gave her a questioning look. Yili shook her head to express her helplessness. Walking to Emo Xuyao's side, she sat down and told him about what happened in the imperial garden in a low voice. Emo Xuyao nodded and said, I will send someone to investigate later. They should stay with me tonight. Yili nodded indifferently. Only then did she realize that the atmosphere in the hall seemed to be stranger than when she left. The original singing and dancing had long stopped. Everyone's eyes were faintly looking in the direction of the envoys from West Hill and Nanzhao. Even Yi Li's quiet entrance didn't attract much attention. Hua Tianxiang gave Yi Li a strange smile and pointed her chin in the direction of West Hill. Yi Li looked over and saw that Princess Lingyun of West Hill was crying with red eyes. Today was obviously not Princess Lingyun's lucky day. She was crying again after such a short time. What's wrong? Yi Li asked in a low voice. Emo Shuyao smiled coldly and said, the Crown Prince of Genom of Gojoseon said that West Hill and Dechu State wanted to marry. Before he finished, Princess Lingyun objected. In the end, the Emperor agreed to marry West Hill, but Princess Lingyun wouldn't enter the palace. Then Nanzhao sent the king of Nanzhao's letter of credence, expressing his willingness to marry Princess Xixia into Dechu State. The emperor's meaning is for Princess Xixia to enter the palace and Princess Lingyun to Prince Li. Yi Li quickly glanced at Yi Ying, who was sitting beside Emo Jingli. As expected, she was staring at Princess Lingyun with a dark expression. On Nanzhao's side, Princess Xixia's expression was also very ugly. Emo Jingli's expression was also clearly ugly. He gloomily stared at the aggrieved Princess Lingyun. Yili looked thoughtfully at Emo Jingqi, who was clearly very satisfied with her arrangements. For a moment she didn't understand what the emperor was planning. Was it purely because Princess Lingyun had angered him that he was marrying her to Prince Li? But Princess Xixia had been in the Chu capital for several months. It was impossible that Emo Jingqi didn't know about the rumors about Princess Xixia and Emo Jingli. Chapter 106. The Emperor will not allow Jingli to have any contact with Nanzhao. Even without Princess Lingyun, the Emperor will not marry Princess Xixia to him. Seeming to understand Yi Li's doubts, Emo Xiuyao said faintly beside her, Nanzhao is mostly barbarians. It is said that the country is small and the people are weak, but their customs are extremely valiant. It is only because there are too few people that it is difficult for them to have any influence. Yi Li said softly, the emperor does not wish for Li Wang to have any relationship with Nanzhao, but Shi Ling seems to be more powerful than Nanzhao. Emo Xiuyao laughed softly, Shi Ling and the Dechu state are enemies. Unless Emo Jingli commits treason, Shi Ling will not give him any benefits. Besides, the emperor does not wish for a prince with Shi Ling blood to appear among the imperial heirs. Yi Li suddenly understood and looked sympathetically at Emo Jingli. It seems that this younger brother of the emperor did not make his older brother the emperor feel at ease. Emo Xiuyao laughed softly, Li, your heart is too soft. There has never been a person without ambition in the imperial family. Yi Li was startled and carefully considered Emo Xiuyao's words. Looking at Emo Jingli, her gaze became more thoughtful. But, did Emo Jingli's brain really have the ability to think of such a complicated matter? Or was he pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger? Returning to the Ding Palace, Yi Li couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Spending half a day in the palace was more tiring than spending a month in total. After bidding farewell to Emo Xiuyao, Yi Li returned to her own courtyard. Mother Lin and Mother Wei immediately led people to welcome her. It was clear that what happened in the palace in the afternoon had already been sent back to the palace. The two mother servants worriedly scanned Yi Li from head to toe. Only after confirming that she was safe and sound did they relax. Yi Li had no choice but to ask for a midnight snack to fill her stomach. Mother Lin waved her hand and had someone bring over a bowl of chicken porridge that had obviously been prepared earlier. Yi Li looked at the chicken porridge in front of her, which was enough for 3 people. Nanny, although I am very hungry, I can't eat so much all of a sudden. Wei Mama glanced at her with dissatisfaction and said, Princess, do you think you are the only one who is hungry? Yi Li blinked blankly. Qing Wan and the others had already gone down to eat. Wei Mama's face was full of disappointment as she stuffed the chicken porridge and the tray into her hands, saying, Prince has gone to the study. Wang Fei should send it over to eat with the prince. There's no need for that. I'll get someone to pass it to Ajin. My lady. Mother Lin sternly stared at Yi Li and said, You are Prince's wife. How can you let someone else do something like delivering supper? Did Heir Furen forget to call you a wife when you were in the Su family? Seeing Mother Lin's expression that was about to lecture her, Yi Li hurriedly picked up the porridge and said, Nanny, I know. I'll send it over to Prince. Without waiting for Mother Lin to respond, she ran out with the chicken porridge. Yi Li felt that she had been wronged. The 2 nannies were very naggy, but compared to the nanny, Yi Li was more afraid of this Mother Lin who followed her mother. As long as she opened her mouth, she would quote the classics, explain the reasons, and lower her head to admit her mistake. A normal person would not be able to withstand this kind of verbal and mental attack. Helplessly, she walked in the corridors of the Wang Fu with the midnight snack. The Yahuan behind her also tactfully followed at a distance that was not too far or too close. Emo Xiuyao still lived in the courtyard he lived in before the wedding, right next to Yi Li's courtyard. So before Yi Li could finish cursing in her heart, she was already standing outside Emo Xiuyao's study. Just as she was about to knock, Emo Xiuyao's voice came from inside. Is it Li? Come in. Pushing the door open, Emo Xiuyao was writing something under the candlelight. Seeing Yi Li come in, he raised his head to look at her and asked, Why haven't you rested yet? Yi Li walked over and put the things in her hands to the side, asking, Did I disturb you? Emo Xiuyao shook his head. Looking at the things on the table, he raised an eyebrow and smiled. You came to deliver the midnight snack? For some reason Yi Li's face became slightly hot. She pretended to be calm and asked, "What? I can't deliver the midnight snack to you?" Mo Shuyao shook his head and put down the pen in his hands, smiling. "I'm just curious why Li Li would take the initiative to deliver the midnight snack to me? And no wonder no one thought to send me food even though I've been back for so long. As expected after marrying a Wang Fei, other people don't care." Yi Li helplessly rolled her eyes at him and said, "Are you going to eat or not?" Mo Shuyao nodded. "Wang Fei personally delivered it, how can I not eat?" The two sat down at the table. Yi Li took 2 bowls and poured a bowl of porridge for each of them. She first handed a bowl to Mo Shuyao. Even though the two of them had eaten together almost every day, it was the first time they ate the midnight snack together. As they ate the porridge, Mo Shuyao thought and said, "If you don't have anything to do tomorrow, how about accompanying me to see Desal?" Yi Li nodded and said, "It's been so long, we should go see Desal. I hope Desal won't blame us." Mo Shuyao shook his head. "Desal won't care about this. Do I need to prepare anything?" Yi Li asked. Mo Shuyao shook his head. "We're just going to see Desal." Thinking about that sister-in-law she had never met, Yi Li could only sigh inside. For a woman at her most beautiful age to let her life wither away, it really made people sigh. "How did you deal with the palace maid tonight?" Thinking, Yi Li asked about the palace maid who had blocked the way in the palace. Mo Shuyao said with a frown, "That wasn't a palace maid." "She wasn't?" Yi Li was shocked. When had the imperial palace become a place where outsiders could come and go as they pleased? Was the emperor able to sleep at night? Mo Shuyao said with a smile, "She wasn't a palace maid registered in the palace, but that doesn't mean she isn't a member of the palace. There are some capable people in the palace who always have a few hidden cards in their hands. But that palace maid didn't seem to have any outstanding areas." Mo Shuyao said faintly, "Sometimes, it's people like this who don't have any outstanding areas that are the trump cards. Can't you find out who she is?" "She's a death warrior," Mo Shuyao said. Yi Li understood. If a death warrior failed the mission they would die, so naturally she couldn't find out anything. But those who can have such a death warrior in the palace don't know. "So, Li, if you must enter the palace in the future, remember to be careful." "I know." Yi Li nodded. She also didn't have the hobby of seeking death. The previous Princess Ding Wenshi didn't live in the Ding King's residence. As early as the 2nd year after Mo Xuan's death, Wenshi moved to the Wuyuan nunnery outside the city to cultivate. Mo Xuan's 2 concubines also moved with her. Ever since she moved to the Wuyuan nunnery, other than the anniversary of Mo Xuan's death every year, Wenshi had never returned to the Ding King's residence. In the past few years, Mo Shuyao had also been in seclusion because of many reasons, so although he respected this sister-in-law, he wasn't familiar with her. Because she had obtained Mo Xuyao's approval, Yi Li woke up early to do some training openly. Then she accompanied Mo Shuyao to have breakfast together. Both of them then took a carriage to the Wuyuan nunnery outside the city. Chapter 107. Wuyu Nunnery was located on a beautiful hill on the outskirts of the capital. It was also the family temple of the Ding Kingdom. Therefore there were no pilgrims or tourists who came to offer incense. It was very peaceful and pleasant on the way. As soon as they entered the nunnery, they could smell the lingering scent of sandalwood in the air. Yi Li wrinkled her nose as she was not used to it. Mo Shuyao looked at her. "What's wrong?" Yi Li was a little embarrassed as she whispered, "I don't believe in Buddha." If she went in later she could not decide whether to pray or not. It was meaningless for a person who did not believe to pray in front of Buddha. It would not be polite in other people's eyes. Mo Shuyao smiled faintly. "No wonder I have never seen Li go out of the capital to offer incense. In the Chu capital, regardless of whether it was a young lady from a noble family or a pretty girl from a small family, they loved to go to the big temples and nunneries in the capital to offer incense or ask for lots. Some asked for everything to go smoothly, some asked for their husband. But it seemed that they had never heard of the Yi family's 3rd young lady going to the temple to ask for lots to offer incense. Yi Li lowered her eyebrows and said, "Since I don't believe in Buddha, how can I ask for his protection? If Buddha is really spiritual, how can she be so busy with so many good men and women?" Mo Shuyao raised his eyebrows and looked at Yi Li with a smile. "So, Li still believes in herself more?" Yili raised her head and smiled brightly. If I can't even believe in myself, who else can I believe in this world? Emo Shuyao nodded in agreement. Good, I also don't believe in Buddha. Lily can do as she pleases. Not long after, a little nun came out from inside to bring the two of them in. Wenshur was a very gentle woman. Although her appearance was not very outstanding, the calm and peaceful expression between her eyebrows added a unique flavor to her appearance. Even the gray monk robe could not hide the gentleness and grace of a scholarly family. Seeing the two of them come in, her calm eyes did not have any ripples. It was obvious that her heart was as still as water, or it could be said that her heart was withered. Shuyao greets sister-in-law. Emo Shuyao pulls Yili forward and says to Wen, "Sister-in-law, this is Li Li." Yili went forward and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, sister-in-law." Wenshur's gaze fell on Emo Shuyao's wheelchair and face, and then quickly turned to Yili. A trace of sadness flashed through her calm eyes. She said softly, "Forget it. Sister-in-law, come and have a seat." Yili thanked Madame Wen and sat down beside her. Madame Wen pulled her to have a look. She picked up an old brocade box and handed it to her. She said, "My sister-in-law is not a worldly person. I don't have a gift for you. This was given to me by Prince, your eldest brother, when I had just married into the Ding King's manor. He said that it was left behind by his imperial mother. Keep it." This. Although the brocade box looked old, its surface was very smooth. Could be seen that someone often took it out to wipe it. This should be a souvenir that Wenshur kept. Madame Wen smiled faintly and shook her head. "Keep it. I don't need these now." Yili no longer refused. She put away the brocade box and said, "Thank you, sister-in-law." Madame Wen looked at Yili and said, "Your eldest brother only has Heir D as a brother. As a sister-in-law, I am of no use. In the future, sister-in-law and Heir D need to support each other and live a good life." Yili understood that Madame Wen was talking about the change in the Ding King's manor. She did not stay in the Ding King's manor to manage the affairs for Emo Shuyao. Instead, she left the seriously injured and disabled Emo Shuyao and left the manor to cultivate. Yili did not think that Madame Wen was wrong. At that time, she was a girl who was not even 20 years old. She was not even a girl that could be cultivated by a noble family. When her husband suddenly passed away and the only bloodline in the manor was seriously injured and disabled, a woman who was not strong enough could not support the entire Ding King's manor. "Thank you, sister-in-law, for your teachings." Yili nodded. She glanced at Emo Shuyao and said softly, "Since I am married to the prince, we will share honor and disgrace in the future." "Good. Then I am relieved." Madame Wen nodded with relief. Yili frowned. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "Sister-in-law, you must be lonely living here alone. I don't know if you should return to the manor. It is not inappropriate for sister-in-law to cultivate in the manor." Madame Wen shook her head and said, "I am used to the peace here. I will not be used to going back." Yili persuaded again and again, but Madame Wen refused. She had no choice but to give up. After talking for a while, Madame Wen asked the two to stay for lunch. She said that she wanted to copy scriptures and asked Emo Shuyao to take Yili to walk around. Although Wuyuan Nunnery was a family temple, it was not small. Yili pushed Emo Shuyao through the quiet bamboo forest behind the nunnery. Because of Madame Wen, her mood was inevitably heavy. "Li, if it were you, you would not be like sister-in-law, right?" After a long time, Emo Shuyao asked in a low voice. Yili nodded. She suddenly remembered that Emo Shuyao could not see her movements and said, "I won't. I will try my best to live a better life." Emo Shuyao smiled faintly and said, "That is good. Sister-in-law is actually not suitable to be the king's princess consort. Our Emo family has wronged her." If it were not for the fact that elder brother wanted to avoid Emo Jingqi's suspicion, perhaps he would not have chosen Madame Wen, who was born in an ordinary scholarly family. Yili thought for a moment and said, "Perhaps sister-in-law does not regret it." Every time Madame Wen mentioned her husband, Yili could see a faint gentleness and reminiscence in her calm eyes. Perhaps Emo Shuyao had chosen her for the king's mansion, but Madame Wen might have feelings for Emo Shuyao, or Emo Shuyao might have feelings for Madame Wen. Emo Shuyao smiled faintly and said, "The king's mansion has never given her a chance to regret it." The Chu state did not forbid women who had lost their fathers from remarrying, but it was not so easy for widows in the king's mansion to remarry. Without enough courage to face the world, Madam One could not even think of making herself regret. But, I allow you to regret it. Prince, tell me honestly, if you die, can I remarry? Yili raised her brows and asked. Emo Shuyao did not object and nodded. And that is what I meant. Yili looked at the sky and rolled her eyes at a place where Emo Shuyao could not see. A wave of anger that came out of nowhere made her laugh coldly. Then, does Prince want to die early, or do you want to die early? She raised her brows at her strange words. Emo Shuyao smiled. I still want to die peacefully. Really? That's not good news. Move aside. Before Yili could finish her sentence, Emo Shuyao suddenly turned and pushed Yili away. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A burst of sound pierced through the air, and 3 diamond-shaped darts that emitted a cold blue light were nailed to the bamboo beside Yili. Since you're here, why don't you come out and meet me? Emo Shuyao lowered his eyes and stared at the hand that was placed on the wheelchair armrest. Emo Shuyao, you're finally willing to come out of the king's mansion? I thought you would hide inside for the rest of your life and not dare to come out to meet people. A presumptuous laugh sounded and a tall figure appeared in the bamboo forest. Soon a group of black-clothed people surrounded the 3 people in the middle. Emo Shuyao raised his head and looked at the person who came. The smile on his lips was as cold as snow. Do you dare to take off the veil on your face and say it again? Chapter 108. The incomer's laughter suddenly stopped. His gray eyes suddenly contracted. He snorted softly and turned to look at Yili standing at the side. This is Princess Ding, sir. I have not asked for your guidance, Yili said with a nod. Such courage, the man praised. He seemed to look regretfully at Yili and said, such a pity. Emo Shuyao, with such a woman buried with you, you should have no regrets, right? The man clearly did not want to waste words. He waved his hand and the frowning men in black immediately surrounded them. Take Wang Fei away first, Emo Shuyao ordered coolly. Several figures quickly flashed into the crowd. A Jin landed in front of Emo Shuyao with a long sword and looked warily at the surrounding men in black. 2 of the shadow guards landed beside Yili, one on her left and one on her right, wanting to send her away. The remaining people were already fighting with the men in black. Yili swept a glance. A Jin had only brought 7 or 8 people. She had taken away 2, so there were only 5 left. There were at least 20 to 30 assassins in black. Without time to think, Yili waved away the shadow guard who was pulling her and said, stay and help. Wang Fei. The shadow guard stilled and wanted to say something in disagreement. Yili had already lost her patience and walked past them. She casually took down an assassin who was trying to sneak up on her and said coldly, what are you talking about? Take care of these people first. As she spoke, she nimbly kicked away an attack from another. When she landed, she stepped on the body of the assassin who had just been put on the ground and was about to jump up. The assassin on the ground wailed and then fainted. The 2 shadow guards exchanged a look. They would follow Wang Fei's orders and take care of these assassins first. Even though they were well-trained shadow guards, they did not understand what move Wang Fei had used. However, this did not stop them from seeing Wang Fei block an assassin in 2 moves and stomp on another assassin until he fainted. If he was lucky, he would be bedridden for 3 to 5 months. If he was unlucky, he would be paralyzed for life. Yili's attack was successful and her heart was at ease. Although Yili had a certain level of confidence in her skills, she had never been able to determine the depth of ancient martial arts. After all, in this era she had never really encountered a situation that required her to use her full strength. Judging from Mr. Feng Yu's light body technique, he would not be easy to deal with. After all, in modern times, no matter how powerful you are, you can't fly everywhere. But fortunately, not everyone had young Master Feng Yu's light body technique of flying around. If it was only close combat, Yili felt that she could deal with most of the experts. These assassins clearly did not think that this seemingly harmless Princess Ding would be able to knock down one person in one move. By the time they regained their senses, the second person had been knocked down by Yili's elbow. Yili had learned many things in her previous life. She had learned martial arts, taekwondo, judo, and so on from a young age. Of course, she had many brothers and sisters at home, so she had plenty of fighting experience. After entering the army, especially the special forces, the direction of learning had changed from defeating the opponent to killing the opponent. Women were not as strong as men, so Yili's focus had always been on technique and speed. She wanted to kill the opponent in one move. Not to mention the women, even the men in the team did not dare to exchange blows with her. In the beginning she was not very familiar with it. After knocking down 2 people, Yili gradually felt that the feeling of the past was slowly returning. The results of her unrelenting training over the years were showing. Otherwise, no matter how much combat experience Yili had and how many techniques she had, it would be useless if her body could not keep up. Wang. Princess Consort. Ajin, who had been loyally guarding Emo Xiuyao, couldn't help but be shocked speechless when he saw the scene. Was the person who had kicked an assassin taller than him until he spat out blood really the gentle and graceful Princess Consort? Ajin vaguely remembered that one night he seemed to have seen Princess Consort use some method to knock Prince Li unconscious. He had always thought that Princess Consort had used some hidden weapon. Now it seemed that it was completely possible that she had used brute force. Li. Emo Xiuyao's voice rang out from behind her. At the same time, a sharp sword swung at her from behind. Yili hurriedly bent back and barely dodged the sword that was coming at her. At the same time, a dagger that had appeared in her hand at some unknown time swept across the wrist that was holding the sword. Then she grabbed that hand and used his standing posture to twist backwards. With a crack, the person's arm fell to the ground with his eyes open. Yili looked down in puzzlement. At some unknown time, a small knife had been stabbed into the person's back. The blade had been stabbed into the flesh and only the handle was left outside. Clearly he had been killed with one blow. Yili raised an eyebrow. She quickly dodged the entanglements of the assassins and came to Emo Xiuyao's side. Emo Xiuyao said with a frown, "Didn't I tell you to leave first?" Yili and Ajin were on guard against the surrounding assassins. She said, "What if we encounter another group of people when we go out? Will Dasa be fine?" "Someone has gone to protect Dasa." Emo Xiuyao said indifferently, "There are many mechanisms in Wuyu Nunnery. If those people had barged into Wuyu Nunnery first, we would have discovered them long ago." In this short period of time, more than half of the 20 over assassins had fallen. The man who had been standing at the side watching sneered, "The shadow guard of Ding King's palace is indeed worthy of their reputation. It's a pity that there are too few of them." The man suddenly jumped up and the long sword in his hand quickly stabbed towards Emo Xiuyao. Ajin immediately went forward with his sword to block him. The two of them had exchanged more than 10 blows in an instant. But Ajin was only a youth in his teens. With a moment of carelessness he was knocked away by the man's arrow. A hideous bloody wound was left on his right arm. The man did not pay attention to Ajin. After dodging his sword he immediately turned towards Emo Xiuyao again. Ajin cried out in alarm. He wanted to get up to save him but he was held back by the 2 assassins behind him. "Li, move aside." Emo Xiuyao pushed Yili away. At the same time he moved his wheelchair backwards. After dodging the first sword, an even fiercer second sword came right after. A person sitting in a wheelchair who was unable to move was naturally not as nimble as a person standing. Emo Xiuyao turned his head and stabbed his sword into the back of the wheelchair. At the same time, Emo Xiuyao suddenly stretched out a hand to pinch the blade of the sword. With a slight movement of his sleeve, a bunch of concealed weapons flew towards the man. The man was startled. He quickly withdrew his sword and quickly retreated a few feet away to avoid the concealed weapons that were flying towards him. The man sneered and once again rushed forward. He had clearly seen that Emo Xiuyao's greatest weakness was that he was unable to move. No matter how great his ability was, no matter how many concealed weapons he had, there would be a time when he ran out of them. Emo Xiuyao did not dodge anymore. With a schwa sound, a long whip flew out. The distance between the two of them was pulled apart. For a moment, neither of them could do anything to the other. Yili stood at the side and was not in a hurry. From time to time she would help take care of someone who wanted to sneak attack Emo Xiuyao. At the same time she stared at that person trying to figure out his weakness. Finally, when Emo Xiuyao's long whip wrapped around the man's sword, Yili sneered. She pulled out the golden hairpin on her head and threw it at the man's wrist. The moment the man was forced to let go of his sword, she rushed forward and mercilessly attacked the man's vital points with her dagger. Yili's moves were definitely vicious even if one looked at all the martial arts manuals. In just 3 to 5 moves the man's right arm and left shoulder had been stabbed. Yili snorted in dissatisfaction. She ignored the man's right hand and stabbed the dagger into the man's chest. The man's expression changed. His right hand quickly and fiercely slapped towards Yili. At this time it was too late for Yili to retreat. Suddenly, the slender tail of the whip wrapped around Yili's waist and she was quickly pulled back by a force. Yili smoothly avoided the man's right hand and landed steadily in front of Mo Xiuyao. Chapter 109. Not far away, the man's face was ashen white. He gritted his teeth as blood poured from the wound in his chest. When he had been pulled away by Mo Xiuyao's long whip, Yili had taken the opportunity to twist the dagger in his chest. The sharp dagger had turned half a circle in his chest before being pulled out. At this time, there was a bloody hole in his chest that couldn't be covered. Yili looked down at the dagger in her hand and frowned in dissatisfaction. This dagger was trash compared to her favorite tri-edged bayonet. Cough cough. Such a good ding country Wang Fei. I didn't think that you had hidden your skills so well. The man pressed on the wound in his chest and coughed before speaking in a raspy voice. I won't attack if people don't attack me. Yili stared at him and said coldly. It's my loss today. Mo Xiuyao, you're lucky today to have married such a powerful Wang Fei. The man glanced at his subordinates who had been taken care of, and knew that the assassination had failed on the verge of success. Even if there were still 7 or 8 of them, his subordinates could not match the shadow guard of the Ding country Wang Fu if they had the same number of subordinates. However, you can dodge once or twice, but you can't dodge 8 or 10 times. Mo Xiuyao, do you know how many people want your life? Haha. I'll wait for you underground. Finishing, the man gave up on Mo Xiuyao and Yili. He shouted harshly, give up the mission, retreat. Then as the other assassins retreated, they blocked the path of the shadow guard that wanted to chase. In the end they were killed by one of them. Chase. Mo Xiuyao shook his head and said, don't chase a cornered enemy. Let's go back first. The shadow guard that wanted to chase immediately stopped in their tracks. Under Ajin's orders they checked the assassins on the ground. Ajin ignored the wound on his right arm and tightly gripped his sword. Wang Fei, you're very strong. Yili shook her head. I was just lucky. Although he had won that battle easily, if not for Mo Xiuyao's help, he would have been seriously injured even if he had been able to defeat the assassin. In the end, whether it was strength or agility, he was still lacking. There were a few times when he clearly hit that person, but because of the lack of strength, it was not enough to cause significant damage. Furthermore, even if he found the opponent's weakness, he would not be able to succeed because his speed was not fast enough. Very powerful, Ajin can't beat him. Ajin insisted. Yili smiled and said, if I can't deal with him in a quarter of an hour, I'll be the one to die. Wang Fei is very powerful. Can Ajin learn martial arts from Wang Fei? Ajin was a stubborn child and stared at Yili. If he was as powerful as Wang Fei, there would be no need for the prince to make a move. Mo Xiuyao looked at Yili with a complicated expression and said, I thought that Miss Li only knew how to protect herself, but it seems that I was wrong. Miss Li is always able to surprise me. He had seen how Yili had fought the assassin. That gaze and the cleanliness of her attacks were not things that normal women could achieve. Even many of the shadow guard were not as decisive and vicious as her. He was certain that even if 3 shadow guards attacked her at the same time, it may not be Yili who lost. But Mo Xiuyao could not understand. Yili had been raised in a boudoir from a young age. How could she have such skills? Those who did not know would think that this was a person who was used to fighting on the battlefield, and not a daughter of a prestigious family. Yili smiled faintly and was not in a hurry to explain herself, as long as the prince does not feel that it is a shock. Mo Xiuyao looked at her for a long time. Finally he sighed and asked, Miss Li, are you really the Yi family's 3rd miss and the Su family's granddaughter? Yili said, naturally. Then, wait until you want to say it. Yili was stunned. She looked at Mo Xiuyao and did not say anything for a long time. With Mo Xiuyao and the Ding King's palace's situation, to be able to say such words made her feel very surprised. After a while Yili said in a low voice, although I cannot tell you right now, I can guarantee that I am Yili. Moreover, I did not marry into the Ding King's palace with any motive. I believe you. Aren't we husband and wife? Mo Xiuyao said in a low voice. Many thanks. Yili's heart felt warm as she said in a low voice. It wasn't that she didn't think about what she would do if she was discovered. Originally, she thought that she would first learn martial arts from the master Mo Xiuyao found and then slowly get used to it. Actually, this seemed very unreliable. At least she wasn't sure if she could hide it from Emo Xiaoyao. If she aroused Emo Xiaoyao's suspicions, then it would be even more troublesome. Now it saved her a lot of trouble. No matter what, at least Emo Xiaoyao was willing to believe in her. No matter how much he believed, it was already much better than what she had originally expected. "Miss Li, be careful." While she was lost in thought, she suddenly heard Emo Xiaoyao's voice. Yi Li suddenly turned around and a sleeve arrow shot towards her. The dagger in Yi Li's hand instantly flew out. A clear shadow moved in front of her and a figure pushed her to the ground. "Emo Xiaoyao." Yi Li hesitantly called out. She raised her hand to support Emo Xiaoyao's back and instantly felt wet. Emo Xiaoyao powerlessly fell beside her and said with a faint smile, "I'm fine." "Prince." Ajin rushed over to help Emo Xiaoyao up. Emo Xiaoyao's face was deathly pale as he frowned and said, "I'm fine. See if there are any survivors." Yi Li sat up and looked in front of her. The person who had just shot the sleeve arrow had already fallen to the ground, dead. And that person was the person she had knocked unconscious before. She didn't know when he had woken up. She couldn't help but bitterly laugh in her heart. After leaving the battlefield for so long, did she forget what it meant to be vigilant? She had actually left several survivors in this kind of battle. No. In reality, other than the last one, she hadn't killed a single one. These people woke up at some unknown time. She couldn't help but shiver. A slightly warm hand covered her hand. Emo Xiaoyao looked at her and said with a faint smile, "Miss Li, I'm fine." Yi Li lightly bit her lips and said hatefully, "You're injured and you're fine? Then how can you be fine?" Letting Ajin support Emo Xiaoyao, Yi Li got up and took back her dagger to wipe it clean. Then she tore the clothes on his back and checked that the blood flowing out was normal. There should be no poison on the arrow. She was slightly relieved. Emo Xiaoyao said in a low voice, "I'm fine as long as I'm not dead." Yi Li gritted her teeth and waved her hand to let Ajin and the people beside her take him back to the Wuya nunnery. Without her order, the shadow guard had already flown away. He must have gone to find a doctor. When they returned to the Wuya nunnery, as Emo Xiaoyao said, there were no assassins in the Wuya nunnery. One had been waiting for them at the door after receiving the news. Seeing a group of people coming back, they hurried to welcome them and led them to the prepared guest room. Although Emo Xiaoyao's injury didn't look serious now, Yi Li had just checked that the assassin's sleeve arrows were all barbed. She could imagine how bloody the arrows would be when they were taken out later. Worried that one would be frightened, Yi Li asked Wen to go back to the room to have a rest. Wen looked at her and still went to prepare food for them with a worried look. Chapter 110. Emo Xiaoyao sat on the bed. Because of the wound on his back, he occasionally frowned. Yi Li asked worriedly, "Is it very uncomfortable?" "The doctor will be here soon." Emo Xiaoyao grimaced and said, "The doctor will only come to take the arrow. Let Ajin do it. He should be more efficient than the other doctors." Yi Li frowned and looked sideways at Ajin. "Does he know how to take the arrow? This arrow has a hook. If it was a normal arrow and it did not hit a vital point, he could just pull it out. But an arrow with a hook was very difficult to pull out. If he forcefully pulled it out, a large piece of flesh would be torn off." Ajin shook his head with a serious expression. Emo Xiaoyao was helpless. If the arrow pierced through, it would have been much easier. Yi Li looked at him coldly and couldn't help but mock. If it was 2 inches lower, it would have been much easier. "Li, are you angry?" Emo Xiaoyao sighed and looked at her with a gentle gaze. It was as if the person with an arrow in his back was not him. "Eh." Yi Li lowered her head in annoyance. A moment later she calmed down and said, "Sorry, I am angry at myself." If she had not been careless and underestimated the enemy, if she had not been so lost in her thoughts, Emo Xiaoyao would not have been injured at all. After so many years of living a comfortable life, her vigilance had deteriorated to such a degree. If this had been on the battlefield in the past, it would have been enough for her, Yi Li, to die 17 or 18 times. Sure enough, the doctor came very quickly because he was dragged over by his collar. This doctor was very brave. After being dragged all the way to the ground, he still had the courage to examine Emo Xiaoyao's wound without a change in expression. After examining the wound, the doctor took the arrow that Yi Li had brought back and looked at it for a moment. Then he said, "Either this old man uses a knife to cut open the wound and take the arrow out, or poke it in a bit and take it out from the chest. What do you think?" "The back." Take it out from the front. Yili and Emo Shuyao said in unison. They couldn't help but glance at each other. Yili looked away as if nothing had happened and asked, Doctor, what do you think? The doctor nodded in satisfaction and said, Both of you have made a wise choice. Although it seems painful to remove the arrow like this, it will only hurt for a short while. Using a knife to slowly cut open the flesh requires a slow grinding process. Moreover, the healing process will be slow. Yili supported Emo Shuyao as she looked at the doctor who was skillfully preparing and asked, Doctor, you seem to be very good at this kind of arrow wound. The doctor replied without raising his head, This old man used to be a military doctor. So that was the case. She watched as the doctor cleaned the arrowhead's tail, then mercilessly held the arrowhead's tail and pushed it forward. Emo Shuyao's body tensed up in an instant, his hand tightly gripping Yili's arm. Yili didn't say a word as she supported him. She watched as the doctor wrapped a sturdy strap around the exposed barbed arrowhead and pulled. A spray of blood flew out. The entire sleeve arrow left Emo Shuyao's chest. The doctor took the strong wine from the side and cleaned the wound. Then he skillfully bandaged it with white cloth. Only then did he raise his head and wipe away the sweat on his forehead, saying, It's fine, it didn't hurt any vital parts or bones. Just change it every day and rest for a while. Yili looked at the blood in the basin next to her and the pile of bloody gauze on the ground, asking, What do you need to take? Something to replenish the blood? The doctor disdainfully twisted his mouth, saying, The prince is still young, his body isn't weak. Princess, if you are really worried, you can stew something like 4 substances soup, Angelica soup to replenish the blood, or red dates soup. Seeing the doctor leave behind a few prescriptions for external use and swagger away with his medicine box, Yili felt a little embarrassed. Why did she feel that the soup that the doctor mentioned was for women? This doctor has a personality. Emo Shuyao smiled faintly, saying, He is the special doctor in our mansion. He used to be a military doctor of the Black Cloud Cavalry. Emo Shuyao was injured, so when asked them to stay in Wuyue Temple to recuperate, they would return to the capital when they got better. However, Emo Shuyao refused and Yili didn't oppose. Since those killers dared to openly assassinate Emo Shuyao near the capital, they definitely wouldn't give up after failing once. Since Wen had made up her mind to stay out of worldly affairs, they would only bring unnecessary danger to her if they stayed here. When the shadow guard sent by the Prince Ding mansion arrived, Emo Shuyao left some shadow guard to protect Wen, and returned to the capital with Yili. Prince Ding was seriously injured near the capital, which was naturally not a trivial matter. However, Emo Shuyao seemed to have ordered people to block the news. After they returned to the capital, the dignitaries in the capital didn't seem to know that Emo Shuyao was injured. Anyway, Emo Shuyao didn't need to go to court every day like ordinary people. He just recuperated at home when he had nothing to do. However, there was one thing that made them quite helpless. As soon as they returned to the mansion, Nanny Sun directly sent Emo Shuyao to Yili's courtyard on the grounds that Prince needed personal care because of his injury. Nanny Lin, Nanny Wei, and Director Emo were naturally happy to see this. They excitedly directed the servants to move Emo Shuyao's things into the new room. They were so happy that they seemed to forget that their master had just been seriously injured by an assassin. Because everyone in the mansion worked hard together, Yili had to take on the task of changing Mo Shuyao's medicine every day. Even though Yili used to be a soldier who had gone through fire and water, she still felt shocked when she saw the scars on Emo Shuyao's body. Not only were there knife wounds on his chest and back, but there were also some sword wounds. It was hard to connect this body with Emo Shuyao's image of a gentle young master. Yili finally understood what Emo Shuyao meant when he said, I'm fine as long as I don't die. To be able to survive such a serious injury, he must have experienced a narrow escape from death that normal people couldn't imagine. Every time she applied medicine and saw this man smiling calmly at her, Yili couldn't help but feel a faint throbbing pain in her heart. However, she wasn't someone who liked to be conflicted. She quickly attributed this strange feeling to Emo Shuyao being injured because of her. She quickly immersed herself in the process of making up for it. Yili rejected Emo Shuyao's previous suggestion of hiring a skilled swordsmanship master for her. Instead, apart from handling the mansion's affairs and taking care of Emo Shuyao, she spent the rest of her time in the mansion's secret training grounds. It was a very focused training of her strength and speed. At the same time, she also trained in a certain type of internal energy that Emo Shuyao recommended. However, Yili knew that internal energy wasn't something that could be achieved overnight. As for the rumors of internal energy being able to split rocks and mountains at its strongest, Yili didn't understand. Why would she want to use her own hands to split rocks and mountains? If she could recover to her peak state, she could break a person's bones with one punch even without internal energy. What made Yili satisfied was that this body's potential wasn't bad. In Emo Xiao's words, this body could be considered a good material for practicing martial arts. Thus, Yili spent most of her time in the training grounds every day. The original training grounds in the mansion had been changed by her quite a bit. Since only she and Emo Xiao used it, Emo Xiao didn't care how she changed it or how she practiced. He would only occasionally go to the training grounds to watch her practice when he had nothing to do. On the other hand, Ajin couldn't forget Yili's skills after seeing her fight. Every time he was by Emo Xiao's side, he would stare at Yili and Qing Shuang and Qing Wan who were practicing with Yili. He was just short of begging Wang Fei to take him as a disciple. Chapter 111. Emo Xiao also came from a military background. In the beginning he didn't see the benefits of Yili's training, but as time passed he began to see. Seeing Ajin looking pitifully at the three figures in the training field, Emo Xiao couldn't help but speak up for him. Yili only smiled when she heard this. Right now I'm only doing recovery training. The most important thing is to train my strength, speed and endurance. There's no secret to it. It's just that Ajin doesn't have much time because he's with you every day. The word recovery made Emo Xiao raise his eyebrows slightly. He smiled faintly. Does Li think that after this kind of training, you can fight against martial arts experts? Yili shrugged helplessly. She took the handkerchief Emo Xiao handed to her and wiped her sweat. Each has its own advantages and disadvantages. The most important thing about my method is that it doesn't take much time and it doesn't have high requirements for one's aptitude and comprehension. Using the Nigong technique you gave me as an example without considering aptitude and comprehension, even if I train for 20 hours a day, how long would it take to succeed? Emo Xiao was deep in thought. Yili looked at him with a smile and said, my training, even though I can't train you to become a martial arts expert, but at most 1 year, I can make a healthy person's body reach its peak. If I focus on the various skills. A martial arts expert only has one life. Emo Xiao understood that there were many people with good bodies, but there weren't many martial arts experts. Therefore, not everyone with good bodies could become an expert. Yili clearly wanted to find another way, bypassing Nigong and martial arts. He wanted to make a person strong. Li's way of thinking is very special. I look forward to Li's results. Emo Xiao smiled. Many thanks. Yili smiled. She didn't mind revealing some things to Emo Xiao because only Emo Xiao could provide her with what she needed. In the entire Fu, the only two people who were dissatisfied with Yili's obsession with martial arts were Mother Lin and Mother Wei. It was clear that the two mamas couldn't understand why the elegant and graceful young miss would like to play with swords and spears after marrying into the Ding King's Fu. They even tried to persuade Yili that women should be gentle and quiet and that if she was too strong, the prince wouldn't like her. When the nagging Yili heard the two mamas, she wanted to turn around and run. Emo Xiao looked like he was watching a joke and didn't say anything, allowing Yili to be bombarded by the two nannies. Prince Wang Fei. Li Wangfu sent an invitation. Chief Steward Emo personally handed over a red and golden dragon and phoenix wedding invitation. Yili reached out to take it and raised her eyebrows. Li Wang is welcoming Princess Lingyun as his consort. Chief Steward Emo also knew that the current Li Wang Fei was his Wang Fei's blood-related younger sister and explained. Li Wangfu sent an invitation saying that he is marrying Princess Lingyun as his equal consort. These few days, because of Emo Xiao's injury and Yi Li's own matters, she didn't pay attention to things that didn't concern her. Yili almost forgot about Princess Lingyun and Princess Xixia's marriage and asked curiously, then, Princess Xixia really entered the palace? Chief Steward Emo reported, Princess Xixia is currently living in Zhaoyang Grand Princess Fu. The Emperor and Empress Dowager's intention seems to be to pick a good day to welcome Princess Xixia into the palace in August. But the title has already been announced. The Emperor has already conferred Princess Xixia as consort Xia. As for Princess Lingyun, because Shitzi Genom of Gojoseon is about to leave for Xiling, the wedding is a bit rushed. What Chief Steward Mo didn't say was that although Princess Lingyun was the equal consort was different from the wife consort. Naturally, she didn't need to spend so much time preparing like the wife consort. When is the wedding banquet? Mo Shuyao asked. 3 days later. Mo Shuyao nodded, saying, I know. Chief Steward, go prepare a gift for I and Wang Fei. Chief Steward Mo said with some hesitation, Prince means to attend the wedding? The prince had just been assassinated and it was worrying to attend the wedding. Mo Shuyao smiled faintly, I can't not go out for such a small matter, right? Go prepare. Yes. Chief Steward Mo quickly responded and left. Not only did he have to prepare Prince Li's gift, but he also had to carefully arrange the guards and shadow guard around the prince and Wang Fei to ensure that nothing went wrong. Seeing Chief Steward Mo leave in a hurry, Yili sighed helplessly. She looked at Mo Shuyao and said, I don't know why, but I feel that the peaceful days are about to disappear. Mo Shuyao raised his eyebrows, asking, You like peaceful days? Yili nodded, It's best to be peaceful, to live a smooth life until old age, and then to die in bed without any regrets. Mo Shuyao shook his head, Then why do you still practice martial arts? Mo Shuyao always felt that Yili was an extremely contradictory person. Although she appeared to be elegant and refined like a noble lady, but from the very beginning, she gave him an impression that she was different from an ordinary noble lady. Sometimes she was even more like a general's daughter than Murong Ting. Occasionally, the sharpness that flashed across her brows was not something that an ordinary woman could show. Yili sighed, Just take it that I like to be vigilant in times of peace. No matter how much she told herself that she wanted to live a peaceful life like a noble lady, but Yili was clear in her heart that it was impossible for her to be like Wenshi and completely hand over her life to others. She could give in to her father's differential treatment, she could give in to all the cumbersome rules that she was not used to, and she could even give in to her own marriage. But she could never give in to Yili's nature. She could not let herself become a weak woman who did not know how to rely on others and did not even have the strength to protect herself. There were many things that she had prepared that she might not need in her lifetime, but she would rather put them there for her entire life than to find that she did not have them when she needed them. If Li doesn't like those trivial matters outside, you don't have to care about them. Mo Shuyao said, There will be people below to take care of those things. Moreover, Ding King's Fu does not need too much human relations. Yili understood. The Ding King's Fu had been quiet for so many years, which was exactly what that person in the palace wanted. These years the Ding King's Fu's prestige in the Dechu state had been slowly suppressed. If she, the newly appointed Ding King's Fu, was too active now, it would make the emperor afraid. Thinking of this, Yili's mind suddenly flashed. She abruptly raised her head to look at Mo Shuyao and asked, Why did Nanzhao and Xiling suddenly form a marriage alliance with the Dechu state? The reason that she had told Princess Lingyun before was just to deceive a child. Xiling and the Dechu state seemed to be destined enemies. It was good enough that the Dechu state did not take advantage of Xiling's calamity to loot the burning house. How could it be solved by a mere princess who was engaged in a political marriage? Mo Shuyao's eyes flashed slightly and he said lightly, Nanzhao is just in passing. The one who really wants to form a marriage alliance with the Dechu state is Xiling. Yili lowered her eyes. She only felt that the thoughts in her mind were spinning very quickly, and she could not grasp any clues at the moment. After a while she raised her head to ask, if another war breaks out in the Dechu state, what will happen to the Ding King's Fu?